John, you can take.
We are live. Good morning.
Yeah, that's
So February 9th, it is Friday, February 9th, in Senate Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs. We have our housing commissioner in the witness chair. I'll just set the table a little bit for today. We have a committee bill and we received a rule extension to, until today to work on it, and then it needs to become a real bill. And so by the end of today, before 11:30, we will vote something out that we feel good about. Maybe not complete, but that we feel good enough about, that it will get a bill number, and we will ask to have it back in our committee for next week. So with that said, there are still a lot of question marks and pieces that we'd like to do our best to settle next week. And give our drafters time to work on the changes we've already asked for. So we have the commissioner and the witness chair to help us see where we're at and answer questions that we have about the envisioned process. And some things have been struck as of late. I think we had to break the news to Commissioner Foley and stuff. But we're happy to take any comments you have on where we stand.
Sure, thank you. And acknowledging you've all done a lot of work, incredible amount of time. It's been a moving target for me as well.
Yes.
And I appreciate how much you've all done. So I guess I want to lead off by saying that I appreciate and really value the approach, the sort of phased approach you're taking to getting us to the recommendation from the NRB report. And in the meantime, implementing some extensions that can make sure that there's a period where there are some boundaries and we know we can build. Why don't I just touch on a couple of the areas where the administration might see opportunities for cleanup.
Yep.
And I'll try to.
Are you looking at 8.1 as well?
I am looking at 8.1.
Great.
Is that the most recent?
It
We
is.
are.
It is until later today, but yeah, that's good.
Certainly. So the first thing that I want to touch on is a bit more innocuous, but it's important to the mobile home folks on my team,
The
which
definition,
is the
we
definition.
struck that.
Okay, that did get okay.
No, I'm checking in the next draft. Yeah.
Look at this. Boy, see how quick that was. All right. So I'm gonna now jump back to page 26. So looking at the tier definitions. So, and obviously I'm jumping down to tier 3 because, I think what the administration would largely advocate for is mostly what it does here is these interim exemptions, and then let that be a bridge with a certain date, specific sunset, to get us to the NRB, sort of implementation of the NRB report and sort of the tiered approach. And so our thinking there has been, let's not try to define the tiers now, let's let the NRB do that work down the road. So I say that just to say, we would do, as you've done with the other tiers, the same with tier 3, rather than trying to mark out specifics. Understanding the position you're in, perhaps you want to stake out certain areas. What I can do is I can point out the biggest concerns for us.
Yep.
I'll also note that we have 2 experts in the room from the NRB, so they can also speak to anything, but.
Chime in if you feel like it.
Yeah.
And somebody, ooh, we've got them on either side.
That's right.
We're covered.
You know what, Madam Chair, I never introduced myself to the
Oh,
record.
thank you.
And I forgot to.
I know,
That's so nice to us, Joe.
Senator, I count on you to remind me.
Sorry.
For the record, Alex Farrell, Commissioner of the Department of Housing and Community Development. So, I'd say right at the top, the biggest concern for us would be the prime ag soils inclusion in tier 3. That's pretty broad, and there's prime ag soils in a lot of our downtowns in Vermont. So I think that may be broader than intended.
I think Senator Starr just came in and flagged that for me as well. Something about in our bill, it could creep into impacting farmland that he
Okay.
doesn't want to have impacted.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right.
So
Well,
I just want to flag that for everybody. We're getting VHC2.
And that's on line 9, you said?
that would be on
That is on my.
page 26. Yes. Thank you, Senator.
I mean, if I am reading this correctly, if you have to get Act 250 permit to break ground with any amount of prime ag soil, there could be some serious impacts to farmers, unless I'm mistaken.
I looked tonight.
We see that, sorry.
Page 26.
Page 26, line 9. Well, it's the whole section 53. Begins on line 4.
This could not even be what he's talking about, but I actually want to make sure I understand the prime ag soil thing.
Sure. And adding the caveat that tier 3 is probably the area in which I have the least expertise.
Right, that's fair, that's fair.
And the area we least want to touch.
Well,
So-
we need to make sure that development can happen where development needs to happen, or we don't impact farmland adversely.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Or old growth or forest.
well,
or,
yes,
You know, or
that
extension
can
lines
be
of
defined.
the northeast.
I don't know that getting into detail this session is gonna help as much as giving the NRB the opportunity to define that. And, you know, I would say that what I asked the Energy and Environment Committee yesterday is, what is our 50 by 50? Like, how does that fit into here? If they wanna conserve 50% of the state, map it out, you know, this is a good time to get that going. But not, you know, 95% of the state.
So that's your question, is how does the 50 by 50 mapping?
I would like to
coordinate
set an
with it?
intention potentially at the beginning of the bill that we are committed to 50 by 50, but we're also committed to 20 years of growth that helps get people out of floodplains and creates a healthy vacancy rate, et cetera. I'm looking at intent language later on, but I just don't think we should define it in a way that is completely divorced from the 50 by 50.
Oh, I think we ought to know how these coordinate, how they align.
And that didn't come up in energy and environment yet.
I think that's exactly right. And I mean, you know, in all transparency,
No, line 9.
oh, page 26. I think this is an example of why we say, you know, the mapping is gonna be necessary because of this nuance, it's hard to put sort of these broad,
Right.
swaths.
We can have some serious unintended consequences here.
I think, yeah, I think so. You know, another item that I'll flag, so line 6 and 7 right there, pointing to river corridor and significant wetlands. I defer to ANR, but we see this as redundant because they already have special permitting in those areas, so. I'm not sure including them in tier 3 is necessary,
Yeah.
but again,
I think right now saying may include, it just creates a lot of unhelpful confusion.
that would be a concern of ours.
Yeah.
Um,
But, and it speaks to what we may or may want to do in tier 1 A and B. We may not want to say, include this and this and this, we're setting it out in our interim exemption. And then we can leave the rest, you know, to the NRD, I think.
that's exactly right.
I still want to know better what we're trying to say in each, you know, in terms of 1 A, B, and 2. But
Yeah,
that's a separate.
exactly, what do we want those to look like? And in some ways, I think what's being set out in the interim exemptions can be sort of a broad guide. That's not what they will be, obviously.
Right.
But it gives you a sense of the intent of growth. But understanding the interim exemptions also contemplates sort of a period of growth, transitioning to, you know, sort of the structure of the NRB report. Now, the land at or above 2,000 feet inclusion in tier 3, that's in line 7, page 26. Again, I think that would actually have a surprisingly unintended consequence, dropping that from 2,500 down to 2,000. If that line were to stay here in this tier 3, I'd recommend specifying 2,500 rather than 2,000.
Mm-hmm. I'm just gonna let everybody know that I'm emailing Ellen to say, maybe just take out the may include that whole sentence right now. Because if I don't know what's going on with the ag piece and we have other questions and concerns.
And are we lowering that to 2,000, are we moving out our ski areas?
We definitely,
I think more than that.
I think even we'll talk to Charlie about it, but I do think most of the thought partners on this, we're not anticipating moving down to 2,000.
I was not aware of that move.
Yeah.
What was if it got introduced by accident?
It kind of, we kind of said, oh, well, let's borrow tier 3
Yeah.
from the house and be friendly, and that is not what we anticipated.
And I
So,
think I wouldn't even be surprised if it changed over on the house side too.
Right.
But I'm not certain.
They do want it at 2,000.
They want it at 2,000, okay,
Yes.
all right.
Okay, that was not,
I don't know, there was an exchange where we asked, village council, is this intentional? And she said yes.
Okay,
So are we on the whole gonna wait for definitions for the fine? What date are we expecting the definitions? for
Charlie
tier?
wants to talk about timeline, I hope.
Okay.
Roughly.
Okay.
Somebody knows.
No, because if we're gonna wait on
Yeah.
tier 3,
yeah,
why are we not waiting on all of them?
That's exactly what I'm saying, let's wait on all of them.
That's what I've been having trouble.
Yeah.
with, Defining maps that haven't.
Right now, the language in all of the other ones is really general, and then this one gets extremely specific.
Yes.
Well, yeah, there's how, you know.
So look at them.
I don't know enough to decide. I mean, Montpelier's, I think, is
Right.
800 something. I'm trying to visualize. I know I go uphill all the way to Maple Corners, but I don't know if I'm at 900 or if I'm at 850. I don't know. I just, it's out of my knowledge range to be able to be defining something. that
Right.
I don't.
I think even in our sections that we claim more as our jurisdiction, like 1A and B, we could have some serious unintended consequences trying to get specific. This section, we want our exemptions until this is done. But this one gets really specific, whereas if you look at the other ones in that section, they do not.
I agree, and I would, again, that's another reason to have the dates by which this needs to be finished sooner rather than later. Just
Right.
because we are all now have this concept, it's been introduced, and it's a great idea. So that it provides clarity for what's green lit,
Right.
what's yellow lit, what's red lit.
Well, and this may be something I noodle on over the weekend, but when I've talked to energy and environment, and I hope everyone agrees, it's not just ecologically important natural resources, it's people could be in harm's way
Right.
in these river corridors and on these slopes, you know, that we're,
But we don't even mention old growth for wildlife, and I'm sorry.
well, ecologically important.
That's different, that's a different meaning than wildlife.
Okay.
It's not. Yeah,
want
we
anybody
use it in
blowing
current use,
up
but
the
ecological.
Isle of
Hmm?
Mine. I said, I don't want anybody blowing up the foxes on Isle of Mine.
Right.
It's a coral reef.
Yes.
Goes all the way to Tennessee, went through my backyard in Kentucky. Really? And all these little shells. Now,
I didn't know you lived in Kentucky.
Oh, you go to high school, yeah.
Ooh, we have to hear about
Did you have
that.
questions on?
I didn't say y'all.
Just a quick thing.
Yeah.
This is something that should be able to be managed without a lot of,
And I can say
Yeah.
you, since my.
elevations are no. So it would be great to have a map at some point, maybe not,
I don't wanna bring up maps
Okay.
right now, it's a little
okay.
touchy subject, but I think there was a visualization of this particular
Oh.
piece. That showed that it could be a lot of the state with the road rule set at 500 feet.
Okay,
Which is what is in the
Right.
House bill right now, ours is at 2,000 feet.
Yeah, I'm comfortable keeping it at 2,000.
So there's a map that includes that and.
well, we can talk about this when we get to it.
Yeah,
Right, but
it's big.
there's
Yeah.
a big difference.
we would love a map that, you know, shows a different path at some point.
Yeah.
That's more on the path we're on.
Yeah,
That would be helpful.
And even just an elevation, that would be.
Oh, sure. I
Just
think that
very
exists
simple,
right now.
right, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Do
We
you
can
want
get
like a
that from
topographical map?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what's the highest town in Vermont?
Right,
Williams? Killington?
I don't know. I mean, we.
What a fun trivia.
Yeah.
Let's make sure you get all your,
When you
Right,
visualize it.
right.
I don't think we're quite as constrained for time, I will say, because we have Lich Council working on the next iteration for us to vote out. And we just told them to email Magali when they feel ready, which will probably be around 11.
So
What did you drop? So another meeting there for.
the whole bill did.
Oh, well, what I just mentioned,
Oh.
we dropped the specific language in tier 3 about what it may include. Because the other tiers do not specify what those may include,
We've left the other language regarding 1A, 1B.
flexible and open.
Flexible.
So language regarding tier 3 has been dropped.
Right.
Well, from line 6 to 9, right?
Right. And I will just say, our discussion, I just wanna summarize it and make sure people feel it's accurate. for us, we have mentally separated tier 2 with zoning from tier 2 without zoning.
Right, yeah,
Because it's so broad and we probably want to make distinctions there about what's allowed. So that's our mental separation right now, at tier
Right.
2.
I would.
Because we at least have that in place, even
Right.
if we don't know
Yes.
what that one be.
Right, well,
Which,
right.
that is confusing to me,
right.
but yeah, for West 1B is municipal water and sewer and transit corridors right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Beyond the designated areas and the ring around them.
I would very much support that.
And can I just let Senator, Buck, we did delete the mobile home definition. No, yes, the
Yeah.
mobile home park definition. We deleted.
At the DHCD's request, it's more unhelpful because it brings them. It doesn't help them.
It's just unhelpful.
Thank you. Okay, so I would also just flag the only other, I'd say. Well, I'll let Tax weigh in on the landlord certificate, and I think you're already expecting the commissioner will
Yeah.
also, I'll let him.
And it feels promising, you know, he has his desires and, you know, but I just want to say over again. I personally feel embarrassed to know that we had publicly available information. That's essentially what we've been asking for a long time.
Yeah.
And somehow we've been going in circles on this debate. I don't know what happened, but it is a very useful tool right now.
Yeah.
And so we're debating the confidentiality versus the additional information that might be helpful.
Right, if contact information is added.
Contact or number or rent or, you know, if he
Oh,
doesn't,
yeah.
and we have to, exactly. Senator Cummings is the authority on what tax should be collecting that might fall out of their scope of work that would add a burden to them.
I think what I heard was everything at the tax department is confidential. Yeah. That is essential to their relationship with the public. You don't worry about your taxes.
Right.
They are uncomfortable with the landlord certificate. It was collected
Yeah.
for tax rebate,
Right,
but part of it is public.
right,
They would like to have everything made confidential.
yeah,
And then they could do, you know, X% of
Yes.
landlords.
exactly. They could aggregate for emergencies and
Yes,
for,
and I think if
data.
you start asking for rent, you're
right,
going to get a significantly fewer return.
that is exactly what he said. So we're weighing all of that.
We're working with him at the moment.
Um.
And then
So,
it's also, sorry, it's also helpful, given that we want to know more of where everything is. For a host of reasons, for planners, for disasters, for a range of reasons. We've also asked to look at an additional field on the grand list, which would also capture the number of rental units in a town, so we'd be able to know that.
We'll talk to the Commissioner Blue.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'd say just keeping on the theme of flagging areas of concern.
Yes.
The last one that's, well, not gonna be shocked. Section 28, right, section 28, that's the increase in the property transfer taxes, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
so that's the new 2.5% rate.
Right,
I think nothing more to say there. I'll just flagging that as a concern.
You aren't saying you love it? Don't you think it's brilliant?
flagging something as a concern is probably the best we could ever do on a
Yeah.
tax policy increase, so I'll take it.
Also
Take
being
it.
respectful of jurisdiction.
Right,
And in that vein, I just say, all of the appropriations, I know I've been following along, a lot of these are sort of placeholder numbers.
yes,
I would, certainly on MER and BHIP, advocate for meeting the governor's budgeted amounts.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to make sure that that covers everything I noted.
Are you okay with limiting the increase of 70,000 in VHIP to
Oh, yes.
commercial
Just commercial
conversions
conversion.
alone?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, we are.
is that in this draft or is John bringing that to us today?
I don't think it's in this.
Yeah,
draft.
right, but we'll be able to see new language.
Those were all the items I wanted to flag.
Okay, so just to recap a little bit, you're in favor of leaving things broad in the process. Does the administration advocate for a timeline?
Yeah, that's our big
I
question.
defer to the NRB on that. I
Okay.
think they've actually perhaps been working on possibilities around that.
Great, okay. And I mean, right now, we can't put in our exemptions contingent upon
Of course.
something occurring. So we are setting it to 2029.
Yep.
So I just want to flag that for everybody, if we get,
That's helpful.
okay,
Thank you.
we're not married to 2029, let me say, some people think it's
Some of
way
us
too
think it
long.
should be like tomorrow.
But
2028 or 27 would be preferable.
if someone who gets in the witness chair could say where the stakeholder group or some portion of it is landing on the maps being appealable, I think that will greatly change the timeline if the maps can be appealed or not. I would certainly advocate that they not be able to be appealed because I think you're gonna get a lot of the environmental justice concerns that we see with who can come forward and say, but not in our community.
I see what you mean. Okay, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and to that point, I mean, it's not just that. I think if the community comes together and does this work with our RPCs,
Yes.
I don't think that work needs to be undermined by
Mhm.
people who have not been involved in the process or who,
I could unnecessarily drag out what's already a public
Mhm.
process because there's the.
yeah, I mean, encourage the public to engage and then let it go and to,
And they do have they could, I think we'd leave it so they could go to the NRB and advocate for a position that the RPCs do not hold. But once the NRB approves the maps, they're approved. Like they would have one opportunity to be heard past the RPC level.
When we're doing these maps,
Yeah.
are we doing anything on where we should put a solar panel?
Oh, yeah, that came up in Senate Finance. Do you wanna say
Yeah.
more or?
No, we are having a beauty versus the need for,
Barbarism.
yeah, barbarism is the word that was thrown out. But where towns now have to, are supposed to designate an area for
Renewable energy.
renewable energy, cell towers, whatever. I'm trying to find out if any solar thing has ever gone in any of those areas. I think part of the committee is, if we take out aesthetics, it won't get considered anywhere. And so if we're doing mapping, they seem to know how many acres we're going to need. It would be good if we could do a map as to where we would find solar acceptable.
you're talking about freestanding solar as opposed to co-located solar.
I'm talking about panels.
People raise concerns about co-located if it's not invisible on a roof. I mean,
Right.
if
Well,
it's
not
still
invisible.
next to
If it's just
affordable,
on-
well, I don't know what you mean by co-located, but people raise concerns
Co-located
about
is on a roof or on a building, the current.
Oh, well, co-located could be next to it and powering it, and people have a problem with that too.
I mean,
So-
Well, they may, but
There's,
every person goes through view sheds that are ruined by lines they stop seeing. We have power lines that have wrecked every view shed in
this is a plus,
Yes.
but we need X amount of renewable power in the next 10 years.
Exactly.
And the question is, where do you put it? And power companies would like it where three-phase power is, not up the road where they have to run three-phase power. And so
Does anyone have a comment on the capacity to simultaneously? Well, so, and I guess it's a question too about if we could set in the tiers places where that kind of activity
is acceptable.
is acceptable.
Yeah.
We are already saying that, commercial, industrial are acceptable.
I think it's a
within the-
little early there if we're not, I think if that's a mapping thing, and I think Charlie has about freedom.
Do you want? Yes, I do, I really do want to.
Charlie Baker from Regional Planning Commissions. I'll just note that all the regions, not all the municipalities, but all the regions have maps of like kind of the don't do renewables here and renewables are okay here. That's not gonna fix the issue that you're bringing up because there's aesthetic issues still within there.
Yeah,
So that's just kind of the standard of review for those projects rather than mapping. It's very
yeah,
hard to map out
yeah,
aesthetics.
Right.
I know.
That's the point.
And we're trying to get rid of.
I have a very divided committee. I don't know that anyone is set on either side.
If we're trying to get rid of, in one side, not being able to appeal character of a neighborhood, it sort
Yeah.
of seems a little ironic that we're also trying to get rid of aesthetics, that we're way even weighing this with the value of renewables, but anyway, we just,
We'll say,
Yeah.
join the finance committee.
Yeah, so
I have been there,
But the-
ways and means, 8
Right.
years.
I think the PUC has designated certain areas as preferred areas,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
like,
Right.
gravel pits.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
yeah,
so just, I was just gonna make the point, I think the maps do need to be
Right,
amendable into the future, they're not gonna be a map that
Right.
goes into infinity.
yeah,
So for example, when a gravel pit is finished being a gravel pit, it won't be reasonable for solar. So that's just one example of what would need to change.
yeah.
That's an excellent point, because there's also a wind map, everyone's, saying, I'm worried about wind.
Right,
There is a wind map that identifies the key
Right.
places we need to be building wind.
right.
And we need to get
Okay.
back to.
So it doesn't sound like we can
it doesn't sound.
work it into the bill,
In here.
unfortunately. Any other questions for the commissioner? Do you have any other?
And I guess if I could ask of you, I just want to make sure I understand the intent. I'm looking at the bottom of page 19, on the top of page 20. This is the changing of 10-person appeals,
Oh, yes.
minimum 3%.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sure there was robust discussion on this, and I apologize for being tied up elsewhere.
It's,
you
Is-
missed a good debate.
And I hope I'm not rehashing anything here. I just want to understand, is the intent such that it's a 3% and then there's a floor of 25?
no,
Okay,
it's a 3% or.
okay,
This was our compromise after a robust discussion.
Or,
okay.
You have a small town, this could be 8 people. You have a big town like Burlington, they could do a 3% petition. Or 25 people who did participate in the process
Okay,
can appeal. I know it is far from what was originally proposed. This is where we are. And we'll
Sure.
see what happens.
10% was just way too high, no one could land on 10%.
no,
So
no.
we were at 1%.
But-
Understand, I won't, you had a robust discussion, I won't that back
It
into.
still
You can
has
go look at
the
it.
exemptions
You can go watch it.
intact.
That's right,
I believe it would still have the exemptions intact with the 25 dwelling units and we heard from municipalities like Montpelier that that's where they see the biggest loss of infill development. They have a 16-unit project, they have something and it's right where they said they wanted it for 20 years and then they don't.
Well, I think what they said is there's a lot of lawyers, and when one of the lawyers knocks on your door
Yeah.
and says, I'm gonna fight you to death,
Yes,
they've lost more for just people backing out.
exactly,
because Not
exactly.
wanting to be
Just the
tired.
threat. Just the threat of the appeal,
Yeah.
in that case, Mike was saying.
Right.
Just-
Yeah.
This will have an
Question.
invigorating.
Yeah.
Infill development. Oh, yes,
So if we add it, it
Apologize.
doesn't-
Thank you, you do that for that side.
okay, let's Sabina state her name and.
Sabina Haskell, Chair of VNRB. Back to this, it's either or, so 5% lives in Burlington.
Yeah.
3% would be 1,200 people.
So 1,200 people or 25 people who participated in the
Thank you,
process.
thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out how I'd have to go door to door.
Yeah, I mean, listen, when we talk about fluoride, they get like 5,000 signatures in Burlington. It's
Okay.
actually that hard,
Yeah,
but
All right.
yes.
I did misunderstand.
yes,
Thank you
yeah,
very
it's a
much.
more.
Yeah, we're right.
all right. Those are all my items.
Okay. We would love a map. We would love help with some language, but I'm glad we're landing in a little more flexible place. We want to get a better sense of the timeline. But yeah, we'll continue to work together.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Charlie, next.
Rest.
Thanks.
Whatever you like, I don't think I was next on the order, but.
Oh,
So I'm sorry.
It should be,
oh, really?
well,
Just jump us.
I can bring that.
Can I ask the commissioner something while
Yeah.
we're looking?
Yeah.
Just regarding maps.
Yes.
I have not been keeping track of what's happening in the proposed designations. If there's a way to make a map of those, that would be really good.
So, there have been, I think, attempts at it. Part of the challenge there, though, is it's kind of tied in with the land use mapping, so. And Charlie, correct me if I'm misstating, but so it would be a challenge. Now, in a sense, there isn't necessarily boundary changes contemplated. It's largely the change from the current destinations to the core and then.
Right, that's true. So you could actually consolidate
I-
those.
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
Well, no, I want to stay on this point. I think it's a good point. The only thing I worry about when this bill leaves our committee is it would have, something that's necessary for the session would have to be put in somewhere for us to pull it all together at conference committee or by the end of
Oh,
session.
yeah.
So if we need to do something with the designated areas in here, we should next week. If we don't need to, and it'll come into play sometime else in session, we're okay with that. I just
Okay.
It's
kind of okay with it.
no, it's just relevant to the interim measures that we're
Mhm.
discussing.
But if we say we want all of these exemptions in the designated areas and those designated areas change, it'll still apply.
Right, that's part of my concern.
Yeah.
Your concern is will they drastically expand?
Yeah, or, yes, where,
And I think my understanding is in lieu of any other mapping, the boundaries would not change just because of the changes being implemented.
right, and then we're doing the quarter mile and half.
And the half mile, which is a
Boundaries.
nod to how close our downtowns are to rivers.
Yes, which is very reasonable, but I just, it would just be helpful.
And that we can mostly we already have maps for that, so.
Okay, good,
So that we can
Thank you.
provide maps for the existing.
okay,
For designated areas.
thank
Yes.
Okay. John, can you be BNRC and some combo? You both coming up or?
Morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for the opportunity to come in.
Yeah.
For the record, I'm John Rogan. I'm the Policy and Water Program Director for Vermont Natural Resources Council.
Pete Gallagher, I direct the Sustainable Communities Program with Vermont Natural Resources Council.
So we have, like everybody in the building, working very hard on trying to flesh out these tiers, both the criteria, in our view, that should be in place to approve the tiers and the process. We've been working arm in arm with Charlie and the RPCs. We've met and talked, almost daily about this. So I submitted to the committee and we've written up sort of a summary that could easily be put in legislation. It just needs to be, and then it needs to be debated, obviously. But it's basically talking with the RPCs about what would be the criteria for the tiers? What would be the exemptions in the tiered areas? Or the jurisdictional expansions if it's tier 3,
Okay.
and what would be the process? So,
And we're asking Macaulay.
yeah, I can run through it with you, and then Katie produced some sample maps, which she submitted.
She knows us
Very simple.
No.
That
That's
kind
a
of
kicker.
shows what the tiers, some examples of tier 1A and 1B. The tier 3 is, you'll see what I talked about, is really rough because I don't think we really know what will be exactly. I mean, we have a list of items
Yeah.
that we think should be tier 3, and you may be surprised that it's not
Yeah.
everything above
I was
2,000
gonna
feet,
say.
and it's not prime
Yeah.
ag soil, and it's not,
If
It's
you've
not
been
river
listening to
corridors
us,
even,
you
right.
do Washington County, so good job.
yeah, so.
Yeah,
But because, I think tier 3 is gonna be really determined by, we do think it's appropriate for the legislation to have a list and have some sideboards, and the RPCs want that,
Mhm.
but they'll have to make some decisions, or some subjectivity and, qualitative analysis
Yeah.
that'll have to be done in the planning process, whereas 1A and 1B, I think is less so. I think it's because I think we could better sort of identify that towns that could qualify for 1A and 1B.
We still have lots of questions about 1A and B and 2 with zoning. I think 1B and 2 with zoning get funding.
Right, well, two, like, for us, I'm working off the NRB report, which for tier 2 did not make that distinction. I understand
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
doing something
Right.
else, so I didn't, we'll follow that and happy to analyze that, but I kind of left tier 2 the way the NRB
Yep,
had
that's
set it out in the report.
So we're printing out your words
Yeah.
and then, okay, so this is,
So what would be most helpful, to just give you a summary of the 1A criteria and the process, and the 1B
Yeah.
criteria and the process, and so why don't I start with something you're gonna like? Well,
It's always a good
John,
idea.
my experience.
It all, we're gonna like it.
I don't.
And quite honestly, we're really grateful.
That
You take all the time. We're grateful you.
Let's start with
take it.
1B.
John, we're grateful you've taken the time to flesh this out.
No, this is super
Yeah.
important, like, just to take a step back, this has been mentioned, so this is historic stuff.
Yeah,
This is like a giant
yeah.
sort of shift And I think I said when I was in last time, it's exciting because we're really building it on planning, you know?
Yes,
And,
yeah.
and the RPCs, full credit, they're stepping up in ways that I've
No.
not seen in my 30 years.
Yeah.
Working on
Yeah,
these issues.
50-year paradigm shift, sorry.
Yeah. So,
Well,
Much
appropriate,
more.
right, does.
Yeah, yeah.
so 1B has, based on what the NRB is very, not a lot of criteria to qualify for 1B. Like our vision would be the law would say you qualify for 1B, you have a town with a duly adopted and approved plan and a planning process that is confirmed by the RPCs, that's existing law. So you basically have, a duly adopted plan. And the 1B area would exclude identified flood hazard and fluvial erosion river fording areas. So the map couldn't include those areas. And then 1B, this is, our view is, basically looking at the neighborhood development area. We would say it would be the core area of the village. These would be mostly villages. And then a quarter mile around the village, and that would be the mapped area.
And that's where you see a 50-unit.
And the exemption would be per project. So
Yeah.
one project, 50 units. This is something that we are proposing to basically get the density and get the sort of building up. We were proposing like one project, 50 units on 10 acres or less. So we want to try to keep it tight.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you can have multiple projects.
Yep.
Or multiple developers. And so that would be the exemption.
Okay.
Here's the thing about 1B, if, the way we would see this going into law is that it would be developed between the RPC and the towns working together through the planning process. The RPC then would, if they agreed with the 1B map and a town qualified for 1B, very few qualifications, then would take it to their whole commission. If they approve it, they would go to the upgraded NRB, they approve it, and the exemptions would go into place. That would be the end of 1B.
So can I pause you and ask? You tell us why you think, if I'm understanding correctly, this should be spelled out in statute versus kind of, you bring that perspective and the same stakeholders who made this great kind of broad agreement work out some of those details.
I mean, I think if we agree on these parameters, why not put in statute so there's no debate about what the criteria are and what the process is?
Because
I think it-
unfortunately, details. I think that's the big
Right.
point. For 1B and for 2 with zoning, I think we have different thresholds that we want to put into our interim exemptions and see what happens.
Right, so it's a different issue.
Experiment.
And I don't know, I think this should all go, I think we should I think we can agree on these things. If you don't, you're gonna create discussion and debate and like rulemaking debates that are gonna drag this thing on. I would prefer, I think it'd be better for the state if we just could come to the agreement on, especially tier 1A and 1B.
Mhm.
And then 3, I think I'll give you a list of what we think tier 3 resources are. I think it's gonna continue to be debated vigorously throughout the session.
Yeah,
But I think and Charlie can speak to this, we talked with the RPCs about it, they want guidance, right? They
Sure,
don't want, you leave them too much discretion, it's like dumping too much on them,
Right.
and that's where the debate will shift.
so did you hear our interim exemptions that mentally track for us what we're thinking about 1A, 1B?
I've read Katie's, because Katie's analyzed those, and
Because I guess then we differ. So while we have you as the
Right.
vice chair, we should just understand why we differ. For me, the 75-unit cap was because we have, areas on municipal water and sewer that vary greatly in size. And we used to have this population threshold that I think is not helpful for density. It puts, if you're just under that population threshold, like Middlebury was, they could have had a project that took another 2 years that was 250 units of affordable housing. So, we have an up to that's higher. But we anticipate that a municipality would still say, we're way too small for a 75-unit project. But a Middlebury might say, that's exactly right sized for us.
I mean, I don't know, like, the magic numbers, I can tell you,
Okay.
and I'll let Katie could run through the exemptions. We have a memo we can give. We basically focused on the tiers because that's what we were asked to
Right.
talk about. So
Right,
that's why, but Katie could run through the exemptions and her
okay,
opinion as a planner, but
but yes,
we did debate the 50 versus another number on the NRB. I mean, there's no magic to any of these numbers. but
right, I'm gonna quote you.
We feel free. Kathy Fire
Yeah.
indicated, like, she was on the steering committee. She said, I can't imagine an affordable housing project that would be more than 50 units. PNRC raised concerns at some threshold.
Mhm,
Remember, Act 250 exists to deal with regional impacts.
right,
And at some point, like, it makes, I know we're trying to build housing, so we're trying to find a number where we're allowing some dense housing to be built. Don't go through Act 250 but at some point you get to a regional impact tipping point in some areas, and towns aren't great, even if they have really good zoning and they have good ability to administer the zoning, which would be a 1A qualifier,
mhm,
but not a 1B qualifier. They're not great at involving other towns and getting input from other towns and looking at regional traffic impacts and regional growth impacts. And so there is a threshold where you get such a large project where I think that statewide review is good for Vermont and will be helpful. So we think 50 is that number, that's what we're trying to prevent basically.
Right.
So that's sort of the policy issue.
right. I mean, I think one of our greatest stumbling blocks right now is that I don't think 1B and 2 are well defined enough to be able to say 50 units or 75 units is the right amount in 1B. Where do you envision, for example, my project?
Well, I mean, I
my part,
think we're proposing
Route
one
7.
be well defined. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really broad. You
So
have to have a town plan.
Would Route 7 between Burlington and Shelburne, what would that be in your mind?
Route 7, I don't know, I would turn to Katie or Charlie.
Well-
I'm not a planner.
Yeah, I mean, Charlie would have more insight
Okay.
on that specific, but, so I have another example here looking, Montpelier to Barry.
Yeah,
I think,
I know.
you have wastewater similarly on Route 7.
Yeah.
That could qualify as a tier 1A, just as.
I need to
this-
make sure I'm picturing Route 7.
Okay, we're not.
Sorry, here,
We're on Route 2 or
Yeah,
not 3.
I was like, where does Route 7?
And then also Route 7.
Oh, I see, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
So Route 2, yeah,
So even where I have this Route 2 as tier 2, just again, this is just Katie's.
yeah, is that Barry Montpelier Road?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That could qualify as tier 1A because these are towns that have planning and zoning and would theoretically meet all of the criteria of 1A, and they have, this is all wastewater.
So 1A right now is in gray.
1A is
Green and
in
red.
so the red circles are what are currently the half-mile radius around the designated downtown
Okay.
areas
The
or the
half of
growth
one.
center, which is the green in
Okay.
Montpelier. The light blue gray color is all wastewater service.
Okay, how do you define that right now? Which tier?
So that
1A.
would be 1A.
So all the gray is 1A?
It could be, if that's what
If we define it as such.
if the.
It would qualify.
It would
I think what
qualify.
Katie's saying is through the planning
Okay.
process, maybe towns say, we don't want it all.
Right.
Be 1A and
Mhm.
that's but it could qualify.
It could qualify,
Yeah.
okay.
In our opinion, in
Right.
the BRC opinion, and we're gonna be pretty, narrow about, we're saying that could qualify in
Yeah.
our view.
And then it's up to the town to choose.
It's the
Right,
planning
right.
process.
What they-
There should be a little bit of slack in the planning process,
Mm-hmm.
but they would qualify if towns say, hey, we got giant housing
Right.
needs and we want
Yeah,
to maximize this.
yeah,
Then, and then the RPCs could override, like towns say, hey, we don't want, that's gonna be, but it would qualify. That's what the
Mhm.
law would do. The law would say, this is what's qualified.
Okay.
And so here, just to note that I have these kind of extra squiggles because the town could say, we have wastewater and water capacity that goes out into
Yeah.
these areas. Those areas could still qualify again
Yeah.
for 1A, but they might say, well, we don't have bus service that goes up over here, so we're gonna leave that as tier 2.
where is Senator Cummings' famous pasture.
So that would be
I think that would
downtown
make sense.
here,
It's right there.
or it's within,
It's within there,
It's right
further.
there.
right here.
It's right across from Bar Hill.
Bullseye on it.
Yeah.
It's right up from the hill from Bar Hill.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it backs up to the
Well, I
Dale
go
Carrigan.
further down and it.
I've seen it.
runs,
Okay.
And it has water and sewer.
My son spent his high school years, in bonfires and pasture.
So
That's
that's
a
you.
good-
We'll
Yeah.
talk about
Was that
all
illegal?
this.
Was that
No. I
If
heard
you-
Mr. Zorzi used to shoot people who went on that land
Right.
with rocks.
My son made it through, so. I'm grateful for that.
There
Sorry.
were few Norwich students who fell into the quarry after a party. I don't know.
After it's developed, John, they have to be fire pit.
The quarry is really cool. You guys should do it.
It is-
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've just
should
seen
go.
that.
it's really
Yeah,
amazing.
Egypt.
Oh my
Of course.
goodness. Where's Senator Harris?
Well, just a question about your, follow up on your question about the gray that is shown now as tier 2 could qualify as tier 1A. Say the town,
But the tier 2 is pointing to the white, not the gray.
No,
It's-
it's the
it's
green
it's
part.
that area.
It's all,
But-
it's the transit.
the white.
but just as an example,
Yeah.
you talked about how it could go one way with the RPC, but if the town did not wanna qualify or have it be a tier 1A, could the RPC override that and make
It's up
it
to the
be,
RPC. The way that
and make it
we,
be a 1A?
the way
not
that we
a-
write the process is the
Okay.
RPC's decision based on their planning and the regional plan
Okay.
and the goals. And we can tighten this up any way you want. I'm not opposed, like BNRC is not opposed to saying that if you qualify for 1A, you gotta maximize 1A or under that's a policy choice.
Yeah.
We've really been focusing on trying to create in the statute, those sideboards, okay, what qualifies,
Yeah.
you know? You could then you could create as much slack or as little slack in the process
Right.
as you want.
Yes. No, and this
yeah.
is why that's why I'm digging in it's not to find disagreement, but to find agreement, because we haven't been able to look at maps.
Yeah.
close
I know.
up.
I like
Washington County is important.
To clarify this map, because the gray bit, Katie, between Montpelier and Barry is all served by water and sewer, and that potentially
It's all also floodplain.
all
But
of
the
it.
same,
Good,
Okay,
this whole.
Some of
area.
but just for thinking about Keisha's part of the world, where she wants, that could be a tier 1B or a 1A, if it was, if we wanna look at transit corridors for development, right, Charlie? Okay, got it. So when you,
I'm looking at Berlin Corridors, which is yellow, and I'm not sure what that is. Barry and Montpelier are the cities, so it's pretty easy to block them out. But Berlin has no downtown. And Riverton is over the other side of the mountains, and Berlin Ponds on the interstate, to see a part of it.
and then East Montpelier is the same color.
Yeah, East
Yeah,
Montpelier.
So those are village
Yeah, those are
centers.
villages.
And
This
then
one
quarter
is definitely a
mile.
1B village and
Yeah.
Katie mapped that out. For what is Berlin? What would you say?
You tried to give them a little village center.
Yeah,
Yeah, so you gave them the
they
village.
have village center and
There's a church, and down behind is the town office.
and then you have the new town center.
is that the hospital?
You know, I don't know what the. If it,
I think the blue is the hospital and the
The
mall.
blue is,
So if this came from our
Yeah.
maps, then the blue would be an NDA, neighborhood development area, the purple would be a new town center.
okay,
so which is the hospital?
Yeah, it's in the
It
blue.
It would
It's
be
in
the
there.
purple.
I think it's the
Purple?
purple.
I'm looking right here.
Because from the
Yeah,
hospital
sorry.
down to the Barry Montpelier Road, it's a steep drop.
Yeah, sure is.
Yeah, and so obviously this map doesn't show all of the different constraints. The one in Waterbury have conserved lands, but it doesn't. And the light pink, I don't know if you can really see it up there. I kind of showed it a little bit more, but that's all flood area. So
Okay.
just looking in this
Yeah.
example where, when we think about a town like Waterbury that we know has really significant flood risks, the amount of development potential here is still kind of all northwest of Main Street, so all of this area going up to the Colbyville area over here, where we still have wastewater and over to these.
They actually
Which are
have
north.
a traffic jam.
Yes, that is true.
Oh my gosh.
Especially.
This is so helpful.
So here, I don't see any tier 3, right?
Right, so tier three
you're
is
not-
because,
yeah.
so tier three is, I guess it's harder to map because we don't know exactly what it is, but what I can say, but what we don't think it
Yeah.
is the map that the governor showed in his press conference
Okay.
this week. It's not all the prime ag soil. We don't even have river, our worldview is that, so you would exclude the flood areas and the river corridors from the growth areas.
Yeah.
But also, ANR should, and this is another bill, this is what Senator Bray's been
Yes.
working on mostly,
Yeah.
where ANR would regulate development in river corridors
Mm-hmm.
and improve regulation of the wetlands.
Yeah.
But don't make that a critical act. If you don't need Act 250 to regulate.
Okay.
Yeah, in our
Okay.
worldview.
You could,
Yeah.
If someone needs to do it, but you don't need to apply all the
Yeah.
Act 250 criteria in RVU to.
Right.
Like, you wanna apply the river corridor
Mm-hmm.
standards and the
Yeah.
flood standards. You don't wanna apply traffic and,
Yes.
growth and
That's really
friction and
helpful.
all of that. So like, that's why like you can light up a map in red if you
Yeah.
do all those things.
Yeah.
But that's not like what we've been
Certainly helpful.
proposing. I could list you what we think would be tier 3 resources, but
Do you have any mapped that are like? I will say that
Yeah,
the other thing I'm hearing, I won't speak for anybody else, is that the very rural areas are worried about resortification. Being told like you have one little pocket that you can develop and the rest is critical wildlife habitat.
no, absolutely not, no.
Do you have any Northeast Kingdom?
We haven't done that.
Okay.
That is harder to
Yeah.
do because I think that like as we're analyzing these issues and the
Yeah.
NRB did not, the report is very vague
Oh.
on this issue.
Yeah.
And so we are now having to kind of fill in that blank and
Yeah.
everyone is doing it a little bit differently.
Right.
And so like our view generally is that if you had like the forest blocks that would be tier 3
Mhm.
would not only be the most significant ecological forest blocks, but there would be a determination with the RPC and ANR that there's something really ecologically important. So you can't look at the map of forest block. We're not saying that just because it's on the Natural Resources Atlas or the Vermont Conservation by Design, that's automatic.
Right.
It have to be a subjective sort of like case by case tier 3 analysis. That
Yeah.
There's something about that we want to apply Act 250 there.
Mhm.
So that's hard to map because we could do it like and apply our judgment, but it would be pretty narrow, and maybe we'll do that. We can go back
That
to
would be
the office and
nice.
we
I
could
think,
we
yeah.
could do that.
objective, not subject.
Object, no, what would be subject would be subjective because it would be our, applying what we think the ANR standards would be.
Right,
about
But you're
certain-
also using facts about what
Yeah,
travels
no,
where.
it's a it's
What's
using
there.
facts, but it's
I mean,
not
it's
black and white,
accommodation,
it's not, it's just not like, black letter law, as they say.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to have some judgment
Right.
involved, but we know, the things that and this is talking with the RPCs.
Mhm.
that-
And I will
So
say, I'm not trying to cast any aspersions, but not everybody feels the same about their RPCs. And the kingdom has 47 towns. They don't all feel the same about the process that the RPC would be engaged in. So we have to pay attention to them as a unique. rural
Absolutely,
region.
and you should talk to Vapta and Charlie, and I
Yeah.
think the goal is to have everybody be consistent and
Right.
doing the job, but so what we've listed out as tier 3 resources are, so this is how, this is Jamie Fidel, who's our forest person, said
Yeah.
it would be high priority impact forest blocks that have been identified as providing exceptional functions and values that require enhanced protection. So that's some of the judgment. So what is that? Jamie's view, they're fairly narrow set. Now
Okay.
you can have him come in and.
Can he
you can
map those?
I'll go back,
Great.
you can map something
That would
based
be
on
great.
Jamie's view.
Yeah.
We
Right, you
have,
just got rid of my, Windsor County towns, which was a very interesting one, because those are that's a town that
Oh,
has been
Cavendish, that one,
Cavendish and Proctorsville.
200.
but we also have some more tier 3s. So like we've talked a lot with the RPCs about some steep slope areas.
Yeah.
You don't want to be developing there.
Sure.
ANR already identifies class A waters. It's a small subset of our waters that are the highest quality waters or headwaters. We're not talking about lakes and ponds
Mhm.
because they're protected by the Shoreline Protection Act.
Mhm.
We're not even talking about, there's another tier of like class like B1 waters. We're talking about our exceptional headwaters. So we think that's an example of something that we could map. Again, so it would be we could map that and it would
Right.
be a small sort of subset of the
Right.
state. Same with, threatened endangered species and exceptional natural areas, those actually are mapped and do not take up, I think, a lot of area on the map. And there are probably some critical wildlife habitat and wildlife travel corridors that,
Yeah, it's good.
you know, that are exceptional and really crucial that could be mapped.
So you
And
might map all of tier 3 as you're envisioning.
we could,
I mean, that's a big ask,
we
I
could
don't-
use I mean, we just to
Yeah.
know that it's not, A&R is crucial in this. Because like, it's not just the maps, and that's,
Right.
I think, been the, one of the confusing points about this is that like, you could go, we could turn on the Natural Resources Atlas right now.
Yeah.
And it's not a very fine tool. It's like,
Right.
it's just like, oh, wildlife habitat, oh,
Mhm.
forest block, you
Yeah.
know, and you can light it up any color that you
Right.
want, light it up.
Right.
And we're gonna need to be a little finer
Yeah.
in
We're
our,
gonna have-
using that data,
Right.
it's really good data.
Right.
But it's not dispositive of like that activity.
Right. Do you, it doesn't have to be Act 250 jurisdiction, but I didn't have the debate on 50 by 50, but it seems to me that it would be a shame to have set that in motion and be completely leaving that out of the conversation with these maps.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that we've
Okay.
actually had the same conversation.
Okay.
That is, off and running. You know, VHC
Yeah.
is running a process
Uh-huh.
where it is basically developing, a proposal for lands that, could be, how to identify lands that would help us get to the 30 by 30, 50 by 50.
Yeah.
It's not exactly the same. That's, conservation, it's gonna be the conservation with a willing landowner.
Uh-huh.
They could use some current use
Mm,
program, or it could be, intentions like Act 250 or other programs. But I think it would be helpful. I think it would be helpful to identify resources. But I think we could tap into that because if we're doing this over the next 2 years, the HCB's already started. They're a
Right.
year ahead.
yeah.
They've been working for a year. And
Right.
I think by this summer, they'll have some
Yeah.
maps and
I would love to see that
Yeah.
budgeted because this whole
You-
vision with
yeah.
20 years of growth, which
I
almost gets.
I think that's exactly right.
Yeah.
I think this was not intended to kind of run this way, but I agree. So I do think it'll be very useful, and I think the timing is right.
Right.
Because if we're doing this over 2 years, then like I said, they should have by this summer,
Yeah.
some data and mapping that we could look at and tap.
So wait, over 2 years. Timing.
That's our timeline. I don't know what Charlie's current timeline is, but
Your hope is to do what in 2 years?
well,
By the end of 26, what are you hoping to do?
we think that, right away, like if this bill passed, and it set up this tiered process and set the RPCs out to go work with the towns
Mhm.
to identify
With
what,
some money, and that's why we have.
give Charlie as much money as you can find.
We hate,
Under
Yeah.
every
just
seat
give
cushion.
it a lot.
Okay, right? Yeah.
Give it to Charlie, and his financial.
A&R needs to lobby Rick Gunn.
So, so go.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That they can get going right away in the planning. There's like, they should get going. They exist, the towns exist.
Right.
Regional plans exist, town plans exist, we're just enhancing that. They could, certainly over a 2-year period, probably less than 2 years, propose regional plans, identify 1A, 1B, and tier 3 areas. And then they need to go to this new board. Sabina comes in, you can give her some money too.
A new board?
Well, it's gonna be a new version of the
Right,
NRB.
it's 2.0.
It's what's in the NRB steering
Yes.
committee, but we
Yeah,
did
yeah.
all agree we should professionalize it. So it can do things like this,
Mm-hmm.
because right now, like, we don't have people who, are basically paid to do this important work, really important work, right?
Right.
Saying these are 1A areas, they're gonna have full Act 250 exemptions.
Yeah.
These are I'll get to the process, but yes, approving the 1B areas. And tier 3, it's really important, like we've heard from the NRB steering committee, and we've heard even being in the House testifying on their version of the bill. People, the conversation was had, are people nervous about tier 3? And so I think it's important that, those designations go to the board, people can weigh in.
Right.
Landowners can weigh in,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And there's an approval, there's some due process that's
Yeah.
involved, right?
Yeah.
So
So
that's,
that's the argumentation period you see as well.
well, I do, so I listened to, our view, and this is because we've had real problems with other designated areas
Mhm.
in the past, so, we have a growth area program, growth center program now, which has some Act 250 exemptions. We have the Newtown Center program, and they have we have seen decisions over the years that when the boards didn't follow the law and you couldn't do anything about it, because you couldn't appeal those decisions. You couldn't say, hey, the criteria are X, Y, and Z. The board didn't follow them. This was, it was under the Douglas administration. We
Okay.
saw it a couple of times. There's a new town center in Colchester. I've been on the downtown board twice when I worked for state government, 2 different times. And last time I was on the downtown board, Colchester came in to amend or renew its new town center. And we all sat around the downtown board, which is mostly administrative agency officials and some other appointees. We're like, this doesn't meet the criteria. This never should have been granted. What do we do? Do we revoke it? Do we approve it? Do we, if we revoke it, they've relied on this now, Colchester,
Yeah.
people. And so we don't want to see that again. We do think that because it happened before, it could happen again. So we think with tier 3,
Is there like a harm you can point to in that Colchester?
yeah, I think there's been incentives for development in areas that,
We're inappropriate.
yeah, that we're not, really shouldn't have those incentives. And really, there's no debate about it, really, that the new.
Why isn't it being revoked?
I don't, it's hard, it was hard to take it away, like, because people relied on, it was years later.
If they
you know?
relied on it, then it would have been.
Yeah, I voted to revoke it, I think.
I'm sure.
I don't think I won
For the
that
record.
vote, yeah.
Yeah.
There's lots of people.
But anyway, I'm just using it as an
Yeah,
example.
yeah.
So we think tier 3 and tier 1A, because it's full exemptions from Act 250,
Uh-huh.
should have that ability, just that, go to the Supreme, it would be, you'd have to have clear evidence that it would be on the record, so it's not an
Okay.
appeal that would be like evidence or witnesses. You just, if someone just ignored the criteria, you go to the Supreme Court and say, hey, they ignored the criteria. Now, why I started with 1B is, so
Right.
1B, we're saying there doesn't need to be an appeal.
Uh-huh.
1B, we're saying it's folded into the planning process. The criteria are fairly lax. And if the RDC is working with the towns,
Mhm.
map the 1B area,
Mhm.
send it to the.
Can I
approved
make sure I
NRB, that would be
understand?
it, and there would be no appeal.
1B, your only exemption is for housing as well.
Yes, 50, we have the 50 unit on a lot 10 acre lots. Per
How
project.
do you see this happening in 2 years if people can appeal certain maps?
I'm saying that in 2 years, we're gonna have the tiers identified and ready to move to the NRB. 1B,
Okay.
1B is full divided into the planning process. This is our worldview, none of this is
Yeah,
law, but in our view, like 1B would be folded into the planning process.
Mhm.
So RPCs working with the towns back and forth. To qualify for 1B, we read those qualifications are fairly minimal.
Mhm.
Okay, let's map the area like Katie did. Okay, we mapped it. Do everyone agree with the map? Our regional commission agrees, great. Send it to the new improved NRB. They approve it, done.
Mhm.
It's done. 1B, the exemptions can go into a place right away. Now, like 3, and this is arguing against BNRC's interest in a way,
Uh-huh.
but because I believe in due process and fairness, and I've seen things go awry
I see.
when,
Yeah.
we're saying tier 3 should get special approval by the board. That'll take, and there should be at least an appeal to the Supreme Court on the record, not drawn out. You can make it rocket docket if you want, things like that. But it's straight up, it's a pretty straight ahead appeal. It's
Yeah.
like, here's the criteria. Did they ignore them? Because we've seen boards ignore the criteria before, and then it creates the
Mhm.
new town center
So,
problem where you get a
okay.
designation that really shouldn't have been. And there was no way
Yeah,
to review.
That means the criteria we set in statute would be what the Supreme Court is using.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's, it's a
Right.
big,
Yes.
it's a big deal,
It is.
you know, I
Hard to
just,
appeal, yeah.
yeah. I wonder if,
But accountability is important. I've seen,
right,
and I actually just talking about, I remember like BNRC, we did I think it was the Williston Growth Center. I
yeah,
think the board actually expanded the growth center over the objections of the town.
yeah. Oh,
And BNRC participated and said, this violates the criteria. I think the town agreed, but that was it. There was no
Yeah.
way to
So
rectify that.
what makes me more comfortable if it works statutorily, and I know we can't obligate a new legislature, but would be to set something in motion now, but to come back next year and really give our seal of approval on the final criteria. If it's going to be used by the Supreme Court to make a determination.
Well, first it'll be used by the board, you know.
Yeah.
Right, so, well,
Yeah.
okay, so that, but maybe that could be
Right.
sort of general guidance, but when they
Yeah.
find issues.
Right.
I wanna be able to have a second pass, because we're gonna argue a lot this session, and I don't know that we're
Right.
really.
I think we could do it. I mean, read, I'm not gonna sit here and read.
You are so optimistic, Sean, and I love it.
Listen, you
I
know,
agree with them. I think we can do this.
we gave you like our version of it, mark it up, edit it,
And-
strike through it. We could do it. We're sitting here in February.
Right.
What is it, February 9th?
It's February
We-
9th.
we can
It's
do
early
this.
Can
day.
we
We
talk
can do
to them about the road rule and the elevation?
Right now.
Sure,
Well, before we get to that,
yeah,
can I just ask, talk about who is in agreement on this document?
which document?
I-
Oh, this, okay,
I-
One word,
what I can say is that we based it on our conversation with the RPC. They haven't had a chance. So like I wrote it up based on, we had a meeting on it, we met for 3 hours, you know. And I
Yeah.
based it on my notes. I took a lot of it right from what Charlie submitted. to me.
right,
So I think, you know, there's
This
a
is-
lot of overlap.
this is
but-
the NRC.
Yeah,
and I love
RP.
that, but if it's gonna be fits and starts of like 3 hours of huddling,
sure.
and
Yeah, we're-
I don't feel good taking that all the way to the Supreme Court,
No, with the criteria. it's really-
especially without seeing what they're doing, that's the
Yeah,
problem.
I think
we'll review it first, you know.
This is pretty good, what I'm looking at here. So it's the NRC, RPCs, and who else? And
It was based on our discussions, but it was based on, it was most, would you say that it was mostly, you know, our discussions, you know, but
Don't blame,
I-
don't give all the blame. Rose.
certainly I'm not saying that Alex,
Yeah.
for example.
Senator,
I'm not saying that Megan agrees, for
Well, let me
example,
just
but she should look.
ask a question.
yeah,
well,
She may
The
agree.
RPCs agree, if you all agree with it, who didn't agree with it?
No, nobody yet, but I'm sure it's gonna jump on.
Object to it. Maybe
I
we should
haven't
get
read
that
it,
way.
so.
So we're putting it like, this is a draft, so like,
Right.
to let people
This is a
edit it
first
and
draft.
comment on it, you know? I think there'll be a lot of agreement, I think there's, the core of it, I think
It's good.
there'll be a lot of agreement, but let's see what people say about things that could be changed and edited, it's like I said, it's February 9th, that's
this is a
date it,
draft.
mark it up.
Yeah.
But I'm just again
Yeah.
trying to understand it. Right now, you agree on it. Are there any groups of people, classes of people, areas of people who you believe are likely to disagree with some core elements of this plan? And if so, who are they?
I'm sure that the administration is gonna have disagreements with some of it, they disagree with them with everything we've said so far, so. I think Megan, will agree with a lot of it, but I'm sure she'll have some comments that A&R, has strong feelings about tier 3. You know, we were pushing them, listing these resources, I'm sure they'll have some comments and want to edit it, but I think there'll be a lot in there that they would agree with and things that they would want to change, but.
Senator Cummings.
No, we're talking about planning and we're talking about creating hallmark vibrant communities where everybody smiles.
Oh, I didn't know what you meant by Hallmark, okay.
Hallmark. They're all happy. And, but in order to have happy smiling people that, shop in your downtown, which is your general store and your gas station, you have to have jobs.
Yeah.
And we're planning for housing and we're planning for natural resources, but Montpelier isn't as vibrant as it was because state employees are not here. We're the major employer. Where, in mapping, where do we want hospitals? Where do we want employers? Most of the traffic going towards Colbyville is coming from Chittenden County,
Right.
Waterbury.
Right,
And the same
Right.
goes for St. Albans. A lot of the housing up there is people that are moving up Chittenden County.
right.
And Dartmouth is moving up 89.
Are you proposing like institutional rings that fit into a
Just
criteria?
Where in a town,
Charlie will address that when he speaks, but
Okay.
yeah, I
just
appreciate
where
the
in a
question.
town can you put
Yeah,
an employee that employs more than 3
Right.
people?
right. And where do they put their housing for the
Well,
hospital?
we're doing housing,
Yeah,
but we need
that's
to
great.
do the job.
I think tier 2 is a big question mark for for everyone. I don't know if you disagree. We are trying to wrap our minds around where there's zoning and where there's not zoning. I see an 800-foot road rule and a 2,000-foot
Right.
road rule.
So tier two, we basically, we followed the NRV report, except for the proposal of the 800-foot road rule in addition to the 2,000 feet cumulative road rule. And basically, the NRV report says that in tier two, the jurisdictional triggers for Act 250 would remain as they are today. We did note that we also agreed at the NRV that if you build housing in 1A and 1B, it wouldn't count towards jurisdictional triggers in tier two.
Okay.
Whatever the 10 and 5, whatever the, 20, whatever it is,
Yeah.
it wouldn't count towards
Right.
that
And
number.
did you hear our desire to go from a mileage rule, which feels like it creates sprawl, to a municipality by municipality?
I'm not.
Okay, so we're looking at, in tier two, we're looking at 30/2 exemption, so 30 units within 2 miles. But, no, sorry, 30 units in 2 years, within a municipality. And where there's no zoning, 10 units
And
in
that's
2 years
planning,
within a
water,
municipality.
Is that accidentally restrictive?
No, because, well, basically Ellen said you would be more restricted if you did put the municipality part in. I can't,
Right. So that would be
Yeah.
bigger than 5 miles.
you could say, no,
It could or couldn't.
it would
Somebody's-
include a lot of our municipalities are not.
It would include the whole state if we didn't put a geographical component.
Right.
No, understood. The way we envisioned it is it's
Mhm.
by project rather than by municipality.
Right,
Right.
but if we don't have
To
it,
distance between projects.
So the boundaries, rather than being 5 miles, the boundary would be that tract or tracts of land.
oh, that's interesting. So that's,
I hear that, I don't, I think our ledge council might.
Because then you could only
Yeah,
have one project of that size in the municipality to be. And
in that
especially-
municipality,
I think that's what.
then that's what we're doing, isn't it?
No, I'm saying that's what yours would be. I'm saying you don't necessarily want that.
Well,
If the municipality is really big.
Yeah,
So we could say, in the municipality or within 5 miles, whichever is greater. I don't even know why we do the 5 miles thing.
But you're talking, 2 years, to build 30 units of housing is probably gonna take close to 2 years.
Right,
but
right.
2 different developers could have 2 projects going.
yes.
But they're totally separate, right? I mean, that's not,
I guess that's true.
they would fall under
Right, so
completely
you wouldn't want
separate.
the one developer to have 2 different projects in the
Yes.
municipality.
Yeah,
Okay, but
2
you-
projects could be going, but, right? That wouldn't interfere.
So it's still restricted, okay, it's the same developer, 30 to
Yes.
the same municipality.
Yes.
Okay,
But I think the point is that we're hanging a lot on zoning or no zoning in tier two.
Right.
Yeah,
Because we didn't have much else to differentiate
With a road.
with.
right. Yeah, no, we'll analyze it. I'll look at the.
Yeah. And I went and sat with Charlie Hancock, so I could picture like a small town that needs employees, that needs a workforce. And he talked about a 30 units, small single family home development. That was gonna be right off the main road. And the neighbors pulled up and said Act 250 and it died on the vine. It's exactly what Ann's talking about. It was modest, single family workforce housing.
Teachers, nurses.
So that's what we're really aiming for in parts of tier 2.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen it. I haven't had a chance to look at it. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it, but we could.
Well,
We'll talk
in
about
all
it.
fairness, it's gonna come out of this next draft. We haven't.
Right, this was
Oh,
discussed
okay.
yesterday.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
It's
Yeah,
not in a draft.
but that's what I just want to talk
Yeah.
about tier
Yeah.
2, because it's
Right.
like really a big.
Yeah, so
question.
tier two, we just follow the NRV report.
Yeah,
And as I think I said this last time, I've said this in every committee, the NRV agreement was on this 2000. And basically the reason why we.
was it?
Yes.
Oh, the road rule, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
and then I went to elevation,
Yeah.
okay.
Not elevation.
Sorry, yeah.
No elevation agreement, we're not proposing.
Okay, so in this, there's no elevation.
No, there's not.
Okay, that came from
No.
other minds.
It's been something that's been in bills throughout the
Yes.
years. And I understand, like, as an environmental group, we
Yeah.
think it would protect a lot of resources, but politically, it's been difficult because everyone get the conversation, what's the highest elevation town? What elevation?
What is the highest
is my
elevation?
town? I don't know.
We all got
Woodford, 2,200.
Woodford.
2,275.
The southern part of the state.
We all need to take a field trip to Woodford.
Maybe Google it.
What is it,
2275.
okay,
Right, but in lieu of that, that's why you know, we want to really capture the tier three resources, like I said, that merit protection, that'd be fairly narrow. But what the road rule does in tier two is it requires development to cluster, so it's not a prohibition, you can
Right.
avoid Act 250.
Yeah.
It gives us more comfort that we could make sure we're not seeing scattered development that is fragmenting forests.
so I'll just say this is an area where it gives us room to compromise with where energy and environment is at 500 feet, is what I last heard.
Right, they have 500 feet.
So this gives us room to talk about a single driveway
We,
or a
right,
longer
we do
road.
think, I mean, the issue is, and this isn't new, we talked about the NRB
Yeah.
steering committee, but there was an agreement that, so the 2,000 foot cumulative roads and driveways is very helpful, because it gets those kind of larger
agreement on
development, yeah.
Yeah,
But we did see, and Charlie Hancock showed you,
yes,
right.
a one road.
and so we have done, we've been out with Charlie too, and we've stood at
Mhm.
the road and said, oh, if you walk out like 800 feet, like this would not be regulated, there's no zoning.
Yeah.
And it would, as a forester, Charlie would say, well, this would really be damaging to the
Yeah.
forest. So
Yeah,
so the old road rule was 800 feet. So that's why we think that we still need that protection as well.
I'm
Not
glad,
agree, yeah.
I'm glad we're talking about
Yeah.
all of this. I hope no one feels like we're touching topics.
No, this is great.
We need to.
I think this is true.
Yeah.
I just think that tier two, from my initial understanding of it, is it encompasses a wide range of land. And there's a lot of land in tier two that you would not want roads at all. I mean, so I guess I'm hoping that we'll come up with something to differentiate towns that have done the planning work, that have adopted zoning bylaws and that have done some other things to allow them to greenlight some of those things
Well,
as opposed to
That is kind of what
all
Act
the way through
250,
tier two.
yeah,
I mean, I support the road rule, but I'm concerned that this is a big
yeah.
swath.
So that's why we
of
want
our-
we think the single road is also appropriate. But it's funny hearing this conversation. This is kind of like what traditional Act 250 is the foundation of it is, right? If you have zoning and subdivision, you need
Right.
commercial development on more than 10 acres. And your lot triggers are, 10 lots instead of, 4 lots,
Right.
But so that is that concept would remain. I understand what you're saying, though, it's the largest swath of land, there's no question about it.
And there's a lot of important forests in
Yeah.
that, and
Yeah.
that we are needing for the lungs of the Northeast, so, and for
Yeah.
Vermont, so,
Yeah,
and,
No, it's
so I
been-
just am a little
I
concerned
really appreciate that.
Without
Yeah.
differentiating zoning, non-zoning, whatever.
Yeah, we really wrestle with it, I should have, if you really wanna, I mean, Jamie's the person who can come in,
Yes.
Jamie Fidel,
We'll
but
do
like he's looked at,
Yeah.
different ways to do the road roll, elevations, elevation plus lot triggers, and we've had literally intense debate, going back to the commission on the future of Act 250, which was like 7 years ago now or something like that. Like we
What was
have,
begun, it was 3 years long.
and we had, all these things have been debated, so we,
Right.
this is how we've arrived to where we're arriving,
Yeah.
like, because we have the experience of having had, all these debates.
Right. But you can ask John a question, then I just wanna make sure Katie didn't wanna show us or say other things.
Okay,
Yeah.
man.
Okay, so I'm encouraged by the optimism, and I think we actually can get something done this year. What
Yeah, me too.
what frustrates me still is the 5-5-10, just the assumption that you can't have the same developer do a good project twice in a certain geographic area. And I'm wondering if all of these other restrictions and requirements and could make it not necessary.
But you
to
wouldn't
have
have,
that.
you wouldn't have that in 1B, it would be gone.
Okay, that's what I was.
Yeah, your
I didn't
50
think there-
units, yeah.
Okay,
Your 50 units, one
Okay.
proper project.
Yeah.
On 10 acres, and you can,
So-
another developer can come in and do another 50 units on 10 acres, and those units wouldn't count. If whatever the standard is in tier 2, that's just for argument's sake,
Yeah.
say, it's the 10 and 5, whatever you did in tier 1A or 1B wouldn't count towards, that jurisdictional trigger,
so we've partially gotten rid of it in your.
yeah, you get rid of it in 1A and 1B, basically.
And why do you wanna keep it in?
I mean, we need, tier 2 is an area where we need to make sure, like, we're not encouraging growth there, and we wanna make sure we properly regulate it. you know, we, like I said, at the NRB steering committee, we were like, let's keep tier two what it is today. Maybe we, like, we're doing a lot, I know there's other,
Yeah.
maybe we can come back, see how all this works, and if we have to change tier two, I would say, but it was just a lot to sort of come up with that analysis too, like, how should we change tier two?
So how do you feel about the 30x2 and the 10x2?
I would have to ask
On an
Katie.
interim, on an interim basis, on an interim.
Right, when we
I'm just
wait and
a lawyer talking really, but Katie knows stuff, so.
But that's a
Let's go to
key question.
Katie.
I
Yeah,
think this is a key question, John and Katie, which is, as you know, we're talking about interim opportunities. Until we land and approve and all these maps. So in terms of an interim measure, would you support some of these ideas of differentiating tier two into zoning? 30x2, 10x2, what are your thoughts on that?
and you don't have to answer it if you have, you have to go back to touch.
Yeah, I think I'd wanna think about it a little bit more. I do like the idea and agree that tier two is a very large area and there's big differences between towns that have zoning and not zoning. And that's one of the recommendations that I'll send around this further comments on more specifically the Act 250 exemptions.
Yeah.
One of those is, for example, why I brought up the example of Stowe as an area where we have, if you're just relying on areas with water and sewer, that doesn't necessarily mean that those are appropriate areas for growth because they might have been extended for certain areas. So having
I think
Right.
we still have our definition, I don't know if Charlie's here.
That's already.
Yeah, so, we still have our definition that along municipal water and sewer, municipalities can still decide this was never intended
Okay.
for development at all.
Great.
You may have heard me say over and over again, I don't want people to say, oh, we'll use this municipal water and sewer for single family zoning,
Right.
but nothing else.
Right.
So that's, been our
Yes.
fine balance.
Yes, so can you just tell us what the pink is?
the
Oh, is all.
You know what? I don't, so, the very light pink that you can see along the river is flood.
Okay, then.
I'm
Right,
not
but what's the
sure
darker pink?
what the darker pink is here.
And the greeny
Alpino?
gray, the greeny
Oh,
gray.
I'm trying to see.
Moscow has, Moscow
water
has.
sewer.
Yeah, so all the greeny gray is water and sewer, or sewer specifically.
Right.
The darker green is conserved lands.
No, that would.
And the red is what's actually designated
The pink might also be
neighborhood.
conserved land.
Oh, that.
I know
Oh.
that Stoughton are very active.
Yeah.
Land trust, right, it might be land trust
They have,
land.
they have gotten.
I can't believe it's that low,
thousands of trees
honestly.
restoration.
The rest is like a mountain.
Right, right.
They thought they were okay.
There's that example, I brought up the example of Cavendish and Proctorsville, as one town, and I think that this is.
It is a town of Cavendish.
Right, it's a rare example of a town that has wastewater, as you can see in the green, gray color. But does not have zoning, but also is a town that has, two village centers.
Designated
Village centers. And so that's, just to know when we're talking about tier two, I think that there's nothing stopping towns from still applying for, the older village centers, but the new kind of core designation would be along the same lines of that, so.
But you don't have any flooding mapped here and was a
Yeah.
ton we were hammered in Proctorsville.
Yeah.
And
that's
some
right,
of Cavendish.
there's no.
And then Irene devastated the whole transportation corridors here completely. So, it was almost impassable. It was impassable for
Yeah.
a long time. So, this is a thorny one, I think.
See, there's.
Yeah, other things you wanna share with us in the
I think-
discussion?
I think, there's not too much else that would be super helpful for this conversation, just to not get us off track too much. I did note in my comments, though, just to go back to the conversation, that Senator Cummings brought up about where we're placing businesses. I do recommend that priority housing projects and the kind of new redefinition, I think it could still be retain a mixed use component of
Interesting.
because I think that, especially as we think about the types of developments and
Right.
you know, for
Right.
for seniors and others,
Yeah.
having retail and other services
Right.
combined is really important.
So, and we could have just mixed use PHPs, which are pretty much workforce. It's, you know, some
Okay, but
affordable
mixed use tends to be retail
on the bottom floor.
on the bottom
Yeah.
floors. In order to buy something retail, I have to have a job that pays me. The
Right.
retail is a shopkeeper and a couple of employees, you know, it's,
Could be a restaurant, you know.
yeah. But in order to shop there, people shop downtown because the state of Vermont pays them a wage.
Sure.
And so it's.
Right, but it might be, that might be an institutional ring idea of like, you have a bunch of traveling nurses and you don't wanna impede building up
You
that.
don't want traffic.
Well, okay, you have a bunch of nurses, you know, I mean, they're here, but you have a bunch of medical
$20 million
staff.
a year in healthcare.
Medical staff who, you know, might be here for three, I mean, they still.
medical
Yeah,
staff.
it's the hospital is a major employer,
Right.
Blue Cross Blue Shield. We're the city.
Right.
People work there. It used to be the granite industry in
Yes.
there. They aren't building granite buildings anymore,
Yeah.
and so it isn't the bustling place it was 20 years ago. Maybe 30, but other small towns up in the kingdom have depended on forestry, the whole Connecticut Valley, St. Albans. That was all the railroad.
Mhm.
Those were
And the precision tool industry.
yes, so, yeah, and that's gone too, that was Springfield.
It's not-
So how do we get retail, small downtowns depends on the businesses. I'm concerned that all the apartments we've developed downtown are affordable. That means the people don't have the money for rent, which means they don't have the money to shop downtown. And we just need to be cognizant
Okay.
of that. If
Right.
you put all affordable housing in your downtown area, you're gonna change the, and I think Megan.
Right.
is-
Well, I may have gotten us off track, so, but I just like the idea of institutional rings. I think you were adding to like what might help us define housing that's really suitable for workforce. Because we don't have PHPs anymore anywhere in our definitions. We have, you know, we repealed the old definition, we put it back for institutional rings or something like that. But anyhow, I don't wanna get us off track. Other things you wanted to.
I'll leave it there, thank you.
Thank you. So before we get Charlie in the witness chair, he's still here, I'm gonna recap what I'm hearing and ask Charlie to sort of weigh in, which is, I think there's a tiny schism about creating really strong definitions for the tiers this session. I'm okay, even if we don't get to that in our bill, that we would have a seat at the table in the end to help set those definitions. I still have concerns about trying to fully set those definitions without a recheck. I know we don't like that factor, but you know, without coming back to us next year. But that's where I'm at. Does
Right.
anybody else wanna
I
comment?
would just say one, you
Yeah.
reserve judgment, you know. Like, I don't know that you need to make that decision. I mean, I understand why you want
Yeah.
to flag that as a concern.
Yes, yeah,
But I just feel it's early
yeah,
and we, see what things look like
yeah.
as the bill, bounces around.
Right. Well, from the early pieces we're seeing from other committees, I worry, and as you may know, the rural caucus has sort of said that they are worried, especially for the reason I raised, that, they don't have a lot of this stuff mapped out. They don't feel like they have their specifics defined, and they're really worried about a lot ending up undevelopable because they don't have bylaws, et cetera, in place. So,
That definitely won't happen. I mean, in that case.
you are so
I mean,
Sean,
I'm gonna live in the fact-based world and say that it's not undevelopable. That would just mean you would have to get permits in some.
Yeah, but they,
Yeah.
okay, in the next few years, hence our exemptions. But,
Yeah.
we really have to listen to our rural members.
I think this is gonna help them, like,
before the
yeah,
session
yeah.
ends.
The idea that, like, I'm a little confounded because the idea
Yeah.
that like VNRC would support one B being quickly identified that could help lots of towns.
Charlie.
You know,
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Basically map out areas and have, be able to build up to 50 units of housing. I think that's a big
A
step
big
forward,
incentive.
Yeah.
and there's no appeal of that, and that can happen through the planning process, and that's the area that helps the rural areas most. The
Right.
one A areas are the more urban areas, because it's a full exemption, like we're saying, should have more criteria and a little bit more process. In tier 3, well, we're like, here's an environmental group saying that's gonna have lots of
Right.
process, and
I'm worried
because
about
we
tier
hear-
2.
because we hear all the concerns.
Yeah.
And tier 2 is the status quo, like, you could build stuff in tier 2 today.
I don't think many people want the status quo in tier 2.
Well, then give this, and this is the caution, and this is, the whole thing falls apart if you just say, well, we'll just build everywhere, and create sprawl, more like linear sprawl along that's not what Act 250 should still be about, even in the 21st century,
And
in my
it's-
opinion.
I don't think it's the intent of the NRB report, task force report.
No, the NRB says that leave tier 2. The way it is, like I said, I think the prudent thing to do, this is major stuff we're doing, and we're doing 1B first. I would argue to the rural caucus, you're going first. And then we can come back next year, like in tier 2, like and just focus it on tier 2 and have a
And
debate
we can
about.
build-
So you're agreeing that there might need to be more work
I'm agreeing
that the
that
legislature does
nothing-
before we get to specifics in all the tiers.
No, I'm not agreeing to that.
Okay, then how would we come back and look at tier 2?
You could come back and like nothing is like, it's not like you never
We can
come back and like analyze. I'm tier 2, tier 2 is basically the status quo. So I'm saying you could set the criteria for 1B.
Yeah,
You could set the criteria for 1A. You could identify, we could agree through a robust debate about like what tier 3 should
Mhm.
include and some of the analysis that will go on. Tier 2 are not changing that much, except we're adding the road rule and
except
So-
you disagree with our current proposal, or you're not sure whether you agree or not.
we have concerns
Yeah.
about expanding exemptions into tier 2. While we're doing all these other incentives for growth in the areas where we really want to grow. And we haven't analyzed really the need, the cost and benefit of all of that.
Mhm.
And that's why the NRB steering committee got where it did on that. So when I say come back on tier 2, it's because we really left tier 2 alone. So it's not like, we're not creating new criteria. Tier 2 is defined in Ellensville as not tier 1A, 1B, or
Right.
3. Okay.
I just feel like
That's
if
tier 2
we send that out to the towns, they're gonna be like, who are these people? What do they think, like,
But
what does
again,
that mean?
Plenty of stuff that's got built in tier 2. The Barry Montpelier Road, I don't know, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of
I thought that was
development
1A.
there.
And well,
Not all the way down it is, not all the way from.
sorry, just
Montpelier to Barry.
to jump in, the map that I have here
Got
is,
built under
is,
existing Act 250.
what do you say?
It got built under existing.
That's right.
250,
Yeah, built under Act
Which, you know,
50.
that doesn't,
which is why we're talking about tier 2.
Well, that did help
Yeah.
with traffic and some things, but it didn't, Act 250 hasn't been super effective at dealing with linear sprawl. Route 7 between all the traffic
It's
between
linear.
Shelburne and when you get off
Right.
of I-180.
and what's getting stopped the most? Housing.
Right, and so we're dealing with that, with expanding this 1B area and building a lot more housing. That's not an Act 250, but Act 250 has not been great at dealing with sprawl, but it has mitigated some impacts. At least it allows for towns to come in and say, hey, we're gonna have more municipal services and we're gonna have more traffic. And there are money and impact fee funds that have been created through Act 250 to make that better, as bad as the traffic is on Route 7 between Shelburne and
I think what would help with the traffic is transportation corridors, with actual
Yeah.
functional transportation.
But we didn't even analyze that in
Yeah.
the NRB, and I just think we're doing a lot with 1A and 1B and 3.
Right.
So that's kind of where our focus has been.
So just know this,
I just wanna let. Katie speak.
definitely.
Well, let's let Katie speak. I think it's funny, because he's about to get in the witness chair.
Yeah.
I really want.
This map I think just might be a little helpful in visualizing, all of the pink are towns that have planning and zoning bylaws. And so you can also see, well, maybe it's a little difficult to see, but all the orange kind of dots in there are village centers, so,
Mhm.
and several of these towns that say that they don't have land use.
Mhm.
But so most of those would qualify for 1B areas. So just to say that most towns are going to qualify for at least
That's.
a 1B village census area.
the village center area. So I think that's still where we're not defining the tiers the same way. Because I would see all of that red that's not a little dot to be eligible. That's also not tier 3, to be eligible for some development beyond 10/2.
But that's current. What I think John's saying is that is allowable.
That's the status quo, but the status quo is not 30/2 in those red areas. That are
Right, but we're
affected.
also not, the status quo is that those village centers don't get any Act 250 exemption.
Right,
So right now, all of those orange would go from nothing to 50
50 units,
units.
right,
Exemption.
Yeah.
yeah, we do
For
appreciate the
project.
map. The
This
map
is what they're
Right.
proposing.
Yes.
Right.
You're proposing that we exempt in those.
Well, that's what the NRB report,
Mhm.
but yes. So that I'm confident about
Right,
that part of it, and we were just filling in some of the
right,
gaps. We didn't in the NRB report say what are the qualifications for 1B and what is, how would you draw the area? So that's what we're suggesting, which people should comment on,
Mhm.
you know?
So to go back to your question about
Mhm.
timeframe. You're optimistic that you think we could finish the mapping and all the work by the end of 26. Is
Yes,
that what I heard you
but
say?
then it would have an appeal period,
not 1B,
just 1A and 3.
that's right. And it would first, it would have to go, 1A and 3 would have to go for like a
Oh, one.
like there's an application for a designation now, the downtown board, there would be an application for a 1A designation or a 3 designation to the new and improved robust NRB.
But and just to point out another area of where we're not on the same page, we're counting all designated areas as 1A. We could change that maybe to, if they don't have any zoning, but they're a designated area, they're 1B. But we're seeing, we want to give them the ability to have a full exemption because they also need commercial activity as well.
Yeah, I don't think, I was not aware of this.
Yeah. Senator Clark.
Um,
Right now, we have, we in our interim have a full exemption for all designated areas.
I thought all designated areas with water and sewer.
We didn't make that distinction.
I think we did. Charlie's thinking we did. Yeah.
So we could say 1A is,
Yes.
well, I mean, we define water and sewer as capacity.
So, but to continue on the timeline.
Right.
So the timeline, how might that align with a notion of some interim period? And this is something you're gonna have to think about. And so you're just suggesting that 1A and tier 1A and tier 3 could be finished by 26. I'm hopeful for a notion of when we think all the mapping and
I
all the
think all the,
decisions.
I think
that
all the
we make.
mapping could be done in 2 years. I think what's hard to predict with 1A and 3 is, then the application's going to the new NRB and then being approved. I don't think that should take, it depends on, you know, that's a lot of work, there'll be work there, it'll be, you get a whole slug of
Right.
these applications.
Yeah.
So I don't know how long that takes. I don't think the appeals are gonna be a problem. I'm just saying you need a backstop.
Yeah.
These are on the record appeals to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
They're not de novo appeals in environmental.
I don't
court.
know how fast the Supreme Court
Yeah.
moves if there's.
It's much faster
30 maps that
than, much
can get-
faster,
The order Supreme Court.
Supreme Court.
It would go straight to the Supreme.
Yeah, it's not, what slows the environmental court down is like, it's the no, you start all over again, it's evidence, discovery, and the blah, blah, blah.
Right.
That you know about. So
Court.
that's what's hard to predict. So I'm just being honest. So for
Right.
1B, I think in 2 years, and I think the maps in 2 years.
So you
Right.
think the whole schmagegi in 2 years?
I think the spaghetti being the maps, yeah, and I really appreciate the use of the word spaghetti. I'm born in Brooklyn.
I think it's fit for you. And I think it's applicable here. So you think all tiers, we can define all tiers, do all the mapping and be done and be ready to rock and roll
I do.
by
I do
December of 26?
I do believe that.
So before.
And Charlie is not.
Cool. So before you leave the witness chair, you know, we have.
Mine's gonna be great. She's gonna, for 5-hour energy. She's gonna be 10 hours.
I do have a lot of faith in tonight.
I mean, we would prefer a quicker timeline, but you know,
Yeah, I
life being what
Right.
life is,
Yeah.
you know,
I can't believe 2
This is-
years seems like the quick, like
This
lightning.
is, this is, this is John Groman's prediction.
And we're so much closer to a timeline right now. I did wanna throw that out, but if, the next week.
Okay,
Yeah.
Senator
Yes,
Harrison.
thank you. So I had understood the process that's proposed would in places, in towns where there's no town plan, that there would be areas that would be, maybe not designated, but shown to be more or less, preferred for development.
If they have a town plan but no bylaws.
Well, if they don't have a town plan. Because because it wouldn't be still just a
It
blank.
is a good statement, Charlie. It's gonna
Oh,
be-
that's great,
Okay, before you leave the witness
Yeah,
chair,
yes.
you know, the NRC has been putting things out about the dual housing crisis and climate crisis. We're talking about growth for the next 20 years. Are you working toward a plan in your mind that builds the requisite number of housing units we need to make sure Vermonters who've been impacted by floods and will be impacted by floods and natural disasters don't have to leave the state and can find something affordable in the state? And that's thousands of people right now. And beyond that, as we look at Florida and Texas and other places in the country that are already, you know, unwinding from climate change, do you support in some ballpark, the kind of figures that have been put out by the housing community for how we need to bring more units back online?
Well, I'll let Katie talk to the numbers, but I mean,
Sustainable
I think,
community,
I said
how
this,
do you define
I
it?
said this when I testified last time, I mean,
Yeah,
and we could get criticized by some of our traditional supporters. We're an environmental group coming here saying, engaging, saying, yes, we need to have, you know, housing exemptions in 1A and these 1B areas, we need to do the planning. And we're agreeing, this was Charlie's, I think, proposal, that in 1A areas, you need to have enough housing growth to meet the housing goals identified
right,
in the planning process. So
Right.
we support that. I think that's a big deal.
right.
That the
It's a
NRC
big deal.
supports
I-
that,
but-
you know.
We are asking for exemptions, and one of my biggest concerns is that people are living in impaired housing right now that they don't feel safe in, and that is making them sick because of natural disaster impact. And do you support some type of interim exemptions
Yeah.
because people need relief now?
We support getting people relief. I think that we feel that we're supporting, you know, lots of reforms to the regulatory process. And that, you know, I really believe that
But in the next,
Act 250, I don't think Act 250 caused the problem for all those people. I don't think this is gonna like solve it on its own. It's so many factors, as you know.
I'm not saying
So I'm
Act
not-
250 caused the
yeah.
problem,
So the,
but we have a problem where people don't have anywhere to move in short order. And we have to have a quicker timeline to get them a new place to live.
and we think that the path we're on is gonna give us the housing we need. I can't speak to the numbers. I don't know what the numbers are exactly with the projections.
But, I mean, yes, is I guess the short
They do
answer.
support interim exemption.
Yeah, I think there's still a question as to what exactly those look like, and we'll certainly go back and look at your more recent proposals. When we've been thinking about the boundaries for tier 1A, I think in particular, part of that is acknowledging that there is enough room for growth for either, I don't know if we've landed on what's in the housing plan or housing growth for the next 20 years, but that has been part of our understanding of this process is
Mhm.
specifically trying to accomplish the goal of, you know, recognizing that there's this significant housing need that we are not currently meeting
Mhm.
and that we are going to try to do it. I do think that, you know, from the sustainable communities perspective, ensuring that we are supporting that housing in locations
Mhm.
that are walkable, that aren't, you know, contributing to the loss of our agricultural lands and so on is also very important. We also are going to have a food crisis and, you know, there's so many other things
Fuel
that.
crisis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, we are still trying to figure out what that balance is, but
Right.
in the meantime, yes, very much, trying to support where we can.
Right.
We have a housing crisis.
Right.
Right.
The
Yeah.
last thing I'll say is just know that I believe, as strongly as I believe in the science of climate change, I strongly believe in the science of housing, that the better or healthier vacancy rate you have, the less homeless people you have, and the slower rent increases you have and the more affordable homeownership. That will be a principle that we take all the way through this process. And the reason we have to engage on Act 250 is it is about units of housing and ways that things become less dense because people get scared away by the process. So we are not leaving the table at any point this year or in future years because we need a healthy vacancy rate in the state to be sustainable.
Amen.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
Put it on the record with you in the chair.
We're all going on the record. Terrific.
Exactly. Thank you, thank you. Charlie. And then Ellen and John might burst in the door. Okay, we're just voting the bill out before 11:30.
Okay.
Trying to make sure we can live with things, so I'm sorry, Charlie, because I know you've done so much work.
It's
Coming
voting,
back.
yeah, for everybody who doesn't know, it's being voted out and it's being recommitted.
So we'll talk more next week.
Yes.
So whatever we don't vote doesn't mean anything, we're come back and fix it.
But we have to get it out.
But it would be nice to have a unanimous vote to get it out and back in.
We're making one.
Yes. Thank you. For the record, Charlie Baker, here on behalf of the Vermont Association of Planning and Development Agencies, State Association of RPCs. And I also worked during some days at the Chittenden County RPC, although lately for different legislative committees. So I'll just make a couple comments, and I think the conversation, I think I agree with almost all of what was discussed.
Very diplomatic, Charlie, that's why you're kind of
Yeah,
being asked
I
to
agree
do a
with
lot.
all of you, even if you disagree. We provided some documents, and we did do a little deeper dive into what we mean in tier one.
Okay,
And so when we were talking about,
Is that
is that
represented in
reflected
this
here?
document?
is it the document that?
Yeah, so it's
The
represented.
VNRC.
Yeah, it's even though it says VNRC and not RPCs also.
That is not my document.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm not sure what
I
you're-
think it's on the web, Magali's printing out.
Sorry.
Okay.
Cause I thought both, John implied.
It looks like
This
this.
was VNRC and
Well, we
RPC.
So we were, it was based on our conversations, you know.
We talked,
Yeah.
but we didn't,
Magali has a
Sure.
question.
Do you want your comments or the maps?
I can share it.
Yes.
You'll share the maps, but you want to.
Let me, I
I
well,
love his testimony.
I don't know whether I should scare you first or, sure, let me scare you.
Probably, I would have chosen the other, but go.
Yeah, I know.
No, scare us first, because we don't know how much time we
So
have. You know.
I feel the need to respond to this tier two desire, like
Mhm.
our regulatory system has incentivized tier two development, right? So sorry, just to know what I'm showing here, hopefully the map is showing. This is Vermont. This is all the residential 911 points that have gotten developed over
So
time.
it's the boundaries of all the,
It's dots. So every house is a black dot.
oh, okay.
Oh my gosh.
So it's,
Okay,
Yeah.
so I just wanted to be clear about our land use policy.
yeah,
What our land use policy
Is
has
small.
encouraged to date
Yeah.
is a lot of, and I'm sure almost all of us live in, well, we all live in one of these black dots, but they're spread across the state pretty uniformly, and you can actually get a good sense of that, right? The Green Mountain undevelopable high elevation lands.
yeah.
What's the blind spot with Barry Montgomery? That must be.
I can't tell you that off the top of my head, but I just wanted to share that map. So just kind of relieves some of the, I mean, between where the planning and zoning has happened, and where we have designated villages. And what our current regulatory system kind of encourages, right?
Yes.
Right, I mean, part of the reason we're here is because Act 250, for better or worse, doesn't encourage the development that our state goals say we want. And so, right, we're doing planning with our municipalities, with 4302, right? Urban and village centers separated by rural countryside. That's our state goal. Our regulatory system has not supported that goal.
Right.
This is, so I think what we're trying to do is tweak the regulatory system to
It's
better,
return to Act 250 script.
yeah, well, and better support that, the
Mhm.
goal
Mhm.
of how do we get more growth in the places we want it and less where we say we don't want it.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, that was scary. I'm gonna share, this is My
You
staff,
can carry your things.
You chose a good color for it.
yeah. Yeah, can't take any credit, but, I'll share this link, as soon as I can, with you all. This is a little map system, we just put together last night that has most of the resource layers we've heard get talked about.
Okay.
You know, so like you were talking about the highest priority interior forest blocks, that's what that looks like.
And I'm just looking at the Northeast Kingdom and.
Yeah, they have a lot of resources. I mean,
Right.
there's a reason it's more rural and less populated there.
Right.
It's owned by a lot of timber companies.
Yep.
I mean, that's our forest products industry.
We own a good
Yeah.
portion of that.
Yeah,
We-
right.
and-
All
and-
champion land.
Yeah,
Sorry, I will step away from the map, because that will take us down a lot of rabbit holes.
Right now.
Okay.
But
What did
just
they
so you
think
know,
on our,
I will get you.
yeah,
Uh,
because I know some people would love to look at that and.
Oh, I like that.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna just share a Word document here with you now, that's a little bit more, sorry. for me to-
no, sorry, Charlie, where are those maps? You
Um,
sent them to us.
They are on a website, I'm going to send you the link to that website.
Right, okay.
I've not done that yet, although I should have.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so this, you got the document that was just pulling up. So when we've been talking about this and, you know, we were working in parallel with the NRB and VHCD in terms of like, what are we trying to encourage? And I think there's a lot of similarities, you know, we're like, we want to keep our centers, our downtown and village centers that are already been designated, so I'm not gonna talk about those. It's kind of status quo.
Well, the problem is I think we keep circling around some really key detail.
Yes.
And so my question is, would you rather leave those general by the end of session? Or get really specific about what's 1A and 1B?
We would like some guidance and statute around what's in 1A.
Mm-hmm,
This planned growth area was our terminology for what 1A.
mm-hmm.
Sorry, it's just a little more English than 1A. And also we were trying to be very purposeful, right? We're trying to communicate to neighbors, like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, don't be surprised,
What is-
there's kind of growth planned here. And why is there growth planned here? Because we have, the town plan is calling for it, they've got bylaws, they've got sewer and water.
Right,
Sorry, I'm reading through the criteria.
yes.
And this is walking distance.
Mhm.
And Chair, we tried to have in item 4 here, some language around the transit corridors,
Is it Roman numeral 4?
Roman numeral 4.
Okay.
Yep, top of page.
A Romanesque.
Mm-hmm.
Excluding the flood hazard, erosion areas, right? So again, noting we cannot be
Okay.
putting more people in harm's way.
Adjacent to transit, that could be a slight, we have like 100 feet from a class something or other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was, we prefer this language.
Okay,
The class 2 or 3 really took us in some weird
Yeah.
directions where the municipality may not be trying to.
Right.
Um,
So as much as I really appreciate this work and I know how hard it was to get here, it doesn't differentiate between 1A and B?
so we were doing something for our purposes.
Yes.
And
But
so,
now we're hearing 1A might have the ability to, it might slow down
with an appeal
and
process.
1B might be fast tracked.
Yeah.
I don't know
So-
how that fits into it.
So we
I
were.
mean, I know Burlington would freak out a little bit if, 1A was going through the Supreme Court all of a sudden and there were no interim exemptions. So,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Supportive of interim exemptions.
okay.
So I think,
Right.
go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
We're in the long game
Mhm.
as usual.
So perhaps the NRB might be in a position to further define 1A and B through your process after session.
If it needs to, I mean, honestly, we don't think this is complicated. This is very similar to existing designation language that we already have in neighborhood
I
development
just don't
areas.
see the difference between A and B.
Right. It's
I
hard
haven't,
to see.
I haven't finished.
Okay. So you are gonna make that distinction.
As he
Trying to.
Okay.
But I mean, I just asked
Yeah.
a key question here.
Yeah.
So my key question for you is, you said at the beginning of your testimony that you want statutory guidance. So to me, that means you want enough statutory guidance to go out and do this mapping so that you can come back to us and we can relight and move forward on these mapped areas. That means to me that we need to have statutory language by the end of this session that we can all agree to, that merges, in some ways, I'd love to have a meshing of these two documents of what you talked about with
Yeah,
John and
pretty
Katie
close.
and what you guys did work
I mean,
on
that's
here.
our job to.
They're very
Well,
close.
it's a combination of our job because because at least with John and Katie's document, it's pretty clear what's one A, what's one B, as opposed to this being a sort of a
Yeah.
mesh. And finish, sorry.
Can I get?
Well, let's
Yeah.
hear
Can I
it.
get
Friday.
two more minutes?
Sorry, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm
You
sorry.
can have 5.
Really? Thank you.
5 minutes.
There's also, we picked up some of the language that's in the NDA about also not encouraging the strip development sprawl pattern, sort of trying to get denser and mixed use, right? I think the village area language is the most helpful as you're thinking about 1B.
That's top of page 3.
Geez, if I put page numbers on here, it might really help.
That's okay.
It's,
It's B.
it's the.
Yeah, it's C, yeah, where we get the C.
Yeah, it's
So is that what you're thinking of as 1B?
Let him,
Yes.
he gets 500.
We're just very excited.
I know, I share. And this maybe needs to be reworded a little bit, and some of this kind of came out of some previous conversation about, okay, are we trying to encourage development where there's no wastewater capacity, like, does that make sense? So in the middle of paragraph C, you will see water, sewer, or soils that are adequate for wastewater disposal. Is trying to be responsive to those concerns. Still require land development regulations. We're not thinking we want to have a place exempt from Act 250 that doesn't have some regulations of their own to manage development, right? So that's the other criteria of the plan and planning process with bylaws, which you saw from Katie's map, is the vast majority of the state is in that boat already. And again, excluding the flood hazard area. So a pretty low bar. Like you have somewhere for your wastewater and you have your planning and zoning in place and you're not in the flood zone. That is really the 3 criteria we were talking about for 1B.
So say them again, not in a flood zone.
Not in a flood zone, always a good place to start. You've got some infrastructure for water, wastewater of some sort, but we're trying to leave it open to like community septic systems, or we're trying to be a little
Got
more
it.
flexible for smaller villages. And it is intended to be the areas around, we have 250 almost designated villages now, 237, something like
It's in
that.
that bag over there.
Designated areas of the land.
And so these village areas would be around the designated villages, right? So we've already got some little commercial core, and then we're talking about the area around those villages where the towns, because they're doing plans that are consistent with the state planning goals, say we want to have growth concentrated around our villages. So that's kind of what we were thinking. I don't think it's too dissimilar from where you are, but that was the language we came up with. Should I stop it at the 1A, 1B? And
You still have 2 more minutes.
tier 3, the whole other.
Well, but you could answer Anne's question about regional energy and
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
this does
I
help
think
map it.
I think I got the answer to that.
Right.
yeah,
But do you figure economic impacts? I mean, most of our villages are villages because you couldn't go and you need the store, but they were built on pre-car,
Yeah.
I'm not worried about a whole lot of those villages growing because there's no enough economic activity near them to make anyone want to live there.
Yeah.
And so how does that force get played into regional planning?
we were trying, in our planned growth area, we were trying to, you'll see it's in the definition more inclusive with population, housing, and employment.
Okay,
So we're trying to include those employment zones that are part of the community.
and can we expand those employments? I mean,
Um,
if we've been trying for years to get an employer up in the forested area of the kingdom. And every governor since has tried to be the hero of the kingdom. But
like around Newport.
yeah, I mean, if
Yeah, we're
we
certainly,
struck oil or somebody found diamonds up there. Or new use for wood chips. But there became, a lot of that was set on the logging industry.
Right.
Timber and paper mills, and they're gone. And like the granite industry's gone, so the economic underpinning of Barry is gone. But something new may turn up.
Yeah.
And do we
yeah,
plan, is there a way that you could put a new employer in the middle of the kingdom where now you've got a village with 3 select board, staff and.
there's a lot of ifs to
Yeah,
get to the places. I think, yeah, in terms of the planning process, right, there's a reason we do plans every few years, right? It's because things change. And so I think if a circumstance changed, an employer would come and was like, hey, I'm gonna put in a wastewater system and I'm gonna build something and I'm gonna put housing here. I mean, we've got a new village happening all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, I think the planning process is flexible enough to deal with those things. I mean, we obviously can't predict all those places, but within our planning, we were thinking more inclusively. So this isn't just mapping the housing sections. This is mapping the entire community. Because also some of those things can convert in either direction, right? They can go from housing to employment, or, now we're seeing some offices and other buildings convert from employment to housing. So we're trying to be as inclusive as possible in all this. So does that help on the tier 1 stuff?
Senator.
Yeah, just a comment to Senator Cummings, and then I just want to ask my question again about planning in the tier 2.
Okay.
It's just the RDCs, the regional development corporations, they're instrumental in that too, and
Yeah.
the BC RDC is now doing work in the kingdom, which should help.
which should help, but I'm watching Chittenden County expand.
Right.
St. Albans
Oh.
has blossomed because people from Chittenden County, that's where
Oh,
the
right.
cheaper housing was and it's a reasonable commute. I'm seeing that happening. I sold houses.
Yes.
In Waterbury, where big houses, mansions started to be built. Waterbury used to be a very poor town. It's not anymore.
Right.
I'm seeing Dartmouth is going up Route 7, I think, or 4, and it's coming up. It hasn't quite reached
Yeah.
Randolph, but it's coming up the
Right.
interstate in a commute. And I'm
So
not sure, how do we incorporate that? There's going to be a need maybe for housing in that area.
Sure.
That,
Well, the housing crisis is acute. I mean, as that you were referencing, I can't even tell you really how acute. I mean, our vacancy rate is less than 1%.
oh, yes,
And, why is,
In the Upper Valley it is. It's-
yeah.
That's the same.
So many places around the state, and then other places we're losing population. So just so you know, these definitions, and particularly on the village one, was very much top of mind to be inclusive of all of the rural towns. So like every town should have some space where they're trying to grow, in a healthy way. And I mean that in a very broad, healthy, environmental health. And so that's where we were coming from. That's where we were thinking. So I hope this is a little helpful, and I probably didn't have enough time to prepare for this conversation.
So when you look at tier 3,
Yeah.
you highlight that land at or above 2,000 feet. Is it an energy plan?
No, that is the definition that was drafted in whatever first bill here. So
Okay.
these are not our recommendations,
I see.
not our recommendations.
Okay.
So these are, I'm
Just
just
wanted to. Sure.
letting you know, the A category
Mm-hmm.
was layers that we already mapped regionally as part of our energy planning work
Okay.
about where renewable energy projects, but frankly, any development should go.
Mm-hmm.
This was A&R informed. Category B was just trying to get at that 50 by 50
Mm-hmm.
thought.
Thank you.
Like, if you look at the interior forest plots, coincidentally, that is about 50% of the state. And then C is the critical resource area. What we understood from the definition, the words I think that were in your bill, frankly, they were in all 3 bills.
Okay.
It was this, you didn't have a habitat. There was a connecting habitat that was
Right.
in 687 and 308. But when we mapped those, that was, and there's this and sorry, now I know we're gonna go down rabbit hole. This
We
is,
like maps.
this is the known constraints that we mapped as part of our energy planning work. So it's 18% of the state.
May I just ask, why are you using energy planning process when it's, for me, natural communities and
Part of that energy planning process was to map natural resources that we should stay away from for
you
renewable
mean
energy
like
projects.
forests, carbon sinks and,
No, it was more
wind
about
and-
wind and solar, like where
Wind
should
and
wind and solar not go?
Mm-hmm.
Or the other way to think about it, where do you have resources that are so important, we don't wanna have development impact them.
oh, I see, so that's what this was initially
Yeah, it
about.
wasn't about the carbon sequestration. It was about which resources are so important that we don't wanna have development impact
That we don't wanna have wind or solar or
Right.
anything.
or anything.
Okay, maybe we'll have you come into finance.
No, thank you.
Lovely.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry, that is not even.
I just don't know what to do with this sighting thing.
So, yeah, so, I mean, it's, some of your map is in conflict with, other maps, like the wind. The wind map, you, southwest.
Well, it depends
You go
on
down
who
to Southwest.
does the map. If you ask the utilities, they'll tell you that.
It shouldn't be, this should be, all, it's possible, no, it shouldn't be.
Good.
So I think these resources were like kind of screened out when they were looking at good opportunities for.
Right, okay, so they were included when the wind
Yeah.
map was.
And then this adds a layer of the 2,500 foot elevation, which is the existing jurisdictional threshold. So you see that adds, a little bit beyond those initial notes.
Is that the yellow?
Yeah, that's that orange color. Yeah, yeah. And then we're gonna get into some shades of green that I don't know how to describe. But this is interior forest blocks.
Okay, so this is potentially our 50 by 50.
Yeah, I mean, or maybe more than that, right?
Right, right.
I assume not every piece
Yeah.
of forest will be.
But it's not like,
Yeah.
those are all uninterrupted forest blocks.
I don't know the technical
Oh.
definition that A&R uses.
Okay.
And then this is highest priority interior forest blocks and highest priority connectivity blocks. So I think that's getting into a little bit more wildlife, so. You'll see some of these, a little more teal green
Mhm.
spaces pop up. And again, I'm not
Oh,
an
those
expert.
are the highest priority, not the green.
The bright green is the interior forest block. The teal green is the highest priority
Okay.
connectivity block.
Okay.
So where do we put solar panels if it's
Uh,
not in the green,
On all the white areas.
all the white there?
Well, and honestly though, but just so you know, the only one that's this is all that's in the energy plans. All right, I'm just showing you other resource layers.
So brown is off limits.
Yeah, that's what's in the energy plans. The rest of this is just resource layers
But not-
that A&R has
well,
produced that
yeah,
have no
wouldn't-
they have no weight in any regulatory system
Right.
other than as an impact analysis through Act 250 of some sort, I guess,
So,
or they may have.
well, if we take out the aesthetics, then there won't be any, the aesthetic impact on the area won't be considered. It's what we've been told. And we've been
The
asked to take-
neighbor's ability.
Right.
The neighbor, well, no, the PUC said they wouldn't consider it either.
From the
at all.
municipality.
Yeah,
But that doesn't mean the resources aren't considered.
Mhm.
I mean, the aesthetic is just how it looks.
yeah,
With the resources, what's there in
Right.
terms of the natural.
But of
Yeah.
course, of course, you wouldn't want the energy plan to include the mountaintops if you're considering wind, et cetera.
well,
So
that's what.
that's a big chunk missing from the brown.
I'm not even thinking.
Yeah, that first map, there was still a lot of high elevation that wasn't included in that first map.
Right.
Right?
But not
This, I don't know if I'm getting to the end. The purple layer is what's already, has some sort of ownership interest, federal, state, municipal, or easements. So you can see, the Green Mountain National Forest
Yeah.
down there, right? Other state lands, you mentioned the state has a lot of land in the kingdom, you can really see that. And again, I'm just providing this for your information. And this is, my GIS planner just merged it all up, which I guess looked a lot like maybe the map that Governor may have used yesterday. So that was not intentional, but that's, I don't know that the maps have been looked at too much when that definition got put on paper. So we were just trying to provide information. I presented this to House Department, Wednesday. So I don't know if that helps tier three. Honestly, from tier three, just to back up bigger picture and kind of go where some of John's conversation went. You know, it would be, from our review, we would like to get, when we talk about timeline, you know, if we got started July 1, we do think it's a normal planning process is kind of, you know, 18 to 24 months. That, you know, doing by the end of 26 or mid 26, end of 26 is a realistic time frame. If we had the criteria for what we were supposed to be mapping, right? So, or capital I, capital F, if. So that's why we're like, if we can get at least the base criteria, or like, you know, this should include at a minimum X, Y, and Z, okay, we can get started. And so, you know, as you're thinking both about, you know, tier one or, you know, 1A, 1B and tier three, getting some minimum criteria in statute would be great because we could get started pretty quickly. Alternatively, you know, it could go into you know, an intent that goes to rulemaking. Sorry, we're getting so with some level of sympathy. You know, that, you know, it goes into rulemaking. How long does that take? 12, 18 months?
A while.
Yeah, 24 months. Or maybe it's coming back to you to
Right.
get into statute afterwards. So, you know, that makes us a little bit nervous because we're just all kind of in limbo. And then if I can just walk through that process that we're envisioning, we work with our towns, our communities. This is obviously, if more weight got put on our maps, because now they have jurisdictional implications from 50, there's gonna be a lot more people interested in our maps than there have been historically, right? Not the word, lots of people. Do I need to end up?
Our directors are on their way, so otherwise I was gonna say we're gonna have to come back at lunch.
No, I can finish up here.
Okay, Senator Clarkson.
So what I hear you saying is that you need minimum, at a minimum. You want this minimum statutory guidance so that you can go forward and get this work started. With enough definition for towns and regional planners to hang the work on. Get it to the NRB so that they can begin their rulemaking process by December 26th. That's what I hear.
Yeah, I mean.
Oh, did you say something earlier than December 26th?
No, well, are you saying the rulemaking would be done by the end of 26?
No, that you would get the
That we would
mapping
be done.
done so that the NRB can then begin the rulemaking process.
That's backwards.
Yeah,
Okay, sorry.
We need rules about what should be in our maps,
By 2025,
or we need clarity in statute.
So
right,
we need, so.
are you agnostic about it?
I thought you were asking us to at minimum have some statutory definitions. Then so I'm confused. That means NRB can then start the rulemaking process as
Yes.
soon as it's in. So great, so then that
My actual preference of the three options, statute's really clear. Statute is a little clear, we need rulemaking to make it clearer and finish that, or it's just deferred to rulemaking. My preference would
Let's
be
get
number
Senator
one.
Cummings
I
to
think
let
we
you know,
want-
so it's gonna.
I am just confused, which is not unusual. Who is doing the tier 1, 2, 3 maps? Are we setting the criteria? They were brought into us as examples. And my understanding is all the towns are going to have to agree on what's tiers 1, 2, and 3 in their communities.
Right.
Are we being asked to set the criteria for what would be in 1, 2, and 3, or 1A, B, 1A, B, and 2, maybe A and B?
It's a question, it's an open question, because if we define it really specifically, the towns don't have much wiggle room, and we may want that or we may not. And the NRB doesn't have much wiggle room, and then it can go to the Supreme Court and no one has any wiggle room.
All three witnesses advocated for three different things.
Right,
Yeah.
Yes.
so you are confused for a reason. Yeah,
And, yeah, and that's why, you know, like, and, you know, there's also ways to word statute that have a little wiggle room. You know, right,
Yeah.
at least include this, but it may include other stuff. So you can leave some flexibility for towns and regions to negotiate. It doesn't have to be a black and white words.
Right.
But
Can I just,
And so I was, so
I just to
go to
correct
John
that.
and Alex and.
I think that, like for one A, what we were talking about was that the criteria, I think, if you look at what Charlie gave you and what we gave you, it's the same. Okay, for one A and one B. And in one A,
Well, okay, but like,
we
for
talked.
us, one AM here.
Right. What we talked about was that, you could qualify, there'd still be slack, the town would still have the ability, just because you qualify for
Mhm.
one A, there could still be a back and forth about
You don't have-
that map. And
Right.
what should be the map area.
Right.
So I don't think I don't think we need a rule I don't think any rule will address that. I
Mhm.
think that's the planning process. You give the qualifying criteria, then they know how to, what qualifies, and then they can have that back and forth. One B, I think we all want one B to be fairly like in place, right?
So
So we can
basic-
build a 50.
Mhm.
That's the
criteria,
easy one.
We can get to
And-
the quick
Right.
exception.
And tier three, we gave you we could refine, we started on what
Right.
that could be and we
So,
could refine
okay,
that.
I just wanna say to Anne's question, we are not likely to fully answer this question by next week. We will make a decision about how much specificity we want. And Ellen will do what she can with what we've been given. But we will just make sure anything that we care about exists in the language so that it's up for debate by the end of session. But we can decide that we don't necessarily have a problem with the specificity being designed a certain way, and then we have input.
And the House is doing a similar bill.
The House has quite a bit of specificity.
Active, our own natural resources.
Yes, well, they have. Part of
Right, they river corridor and they have S308, which was their attempt to put a lot of these studies in one place.
So we're gonna have one very big committee.
A very big committee. Yes.
Yeah, and I think the
Maybe
question
if it becomes-
is, and I think
Rich,
maybe
yeah.
Alex referred to this as like, how tight or wide we're trying to be, like there's an environmental perspective there and sprawl perspective, but then there's also the housing perspective.
Mhm.
We definitely need enough room. I appreciate we mentioned that and John mentioned that too. Like, we have to address the housing issue. Like, it is causing so many other problems in our
Yes.
communities.
So just from,
Alex, did you really have a burning thing? Okay.
so I just
Yeah.
wanna go to sort of the progression here.
Mm-hmm.
Statutory. Minimum definition, statutory language, that goes then to rulemaking, once we pass
Mhm.
that in statute, that goes to then to rulemaking, and then you can start your mapping?
Only if you ask for rulemaking.
Right.
You
So
don't
where
have to
there-
ask for rulemaking.
So where there is agreement across all
Okay.
groups is a timeline.
Yeah.
Even if there's not specificity about the tiers. But there's a timeline. Yay!
So the timeline being, the timeline being the end of
No,
the 26.
right,
We would.
Allison, if we wanna get to the floor on time, we
Yeah.
need to go right
Yeah.
into this.
But the
Which one of you
quickest
wants
thing
to
is
go?
for us to identify it in statute. That's what I'm hearing.
Ellen, do you want to?
Sorry.
The quickest thing is for us
Thank
to
you.
identify it in
Yes,
statute.
definition,
Right.
hello.
It really depends on how soon you all wanna get to.
No, I was just answering.
It's only 58 pages.
Wow.
Cut some out, just.
Wow, big round of applause for our legend council. Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you, John.
We are getting the marked up version printed right now. But we will start now. And I didn't get to set the stage, but this is if you cannot live with something that goes to the floor and comes back. If you just are too embarrassed by it and you can't vote the bill out that way to
We
bring
know
it
we're
back.
gonna continue on.
Yes.
Let's.
Alex Tchaikovsky, Office
We're
of
getting in.
Legislative Counsel. Today I have brought draft 9.1. I'll try to talk real slow.
We're gonna put it up on the screen as well.
That
We, I mean, I did just finish it, so yes, it's traveling through space and time to reach you all. The changes are highlighted in yellow.
We're gonna put it up on the screen too, so that
Yeah,
everyone can follow along.
And it's on the website.
so
there we.
I mean, everything that's in here that's in yellow is what you discussed yesterday. You just may or may not have seen it
Right.
lined up.
I think we would keep, yeah.
So we are scrolling through. Should we get to the first yellow?
Sure.
Okay.
So, this is 75 units of housing constructed or maintained on attractive tractor land located within a municipality with permanent zoning and subdivision bylaws in an area served by municipal water and sewer.
And remember, as it's defined, they can take a whole area out of that for no development.
Yes. Yes, they can define it as not served by sewer and water. I'm a little worried about the grammar in this sentence, but these are the elements you requested.
No one's gonna read it today.
Well, I think a lot of people are gonna read it today and
Actually,
hear
yeah,
about
I
it.
think there are a lot of eyes on this.
And this is separate from the 30x2.
That's on the next page.
Okay, but we did say 75x2 here.
Yes, so
Okay.
75.2,
With some,
zoning
water.
and water.
Yeah.
And this is where we did have 30 here initially, now it's 75.
This is where, if we define 1B separately, they had 50, but they had it in a poor village center. So this is where there's a little disagreement on 1B and the number of units.
So then next on page 3 is further on this same topic. On page 3 is 30x2 and 10x2.
Could we scroll there? Sorry, Nicole, I think we're gonna need you until we have the printed copy. And even perhaps because so many people are watching this, I think we should, just stay scrolling up there.
Okay. So. Sorry, so what's the plan right now? Did you want me to go through all of this? You have 10 minutes till the
Yeah,
floor.
that's just,
Without anybody sort of doing anything unless they can't live with it, but we scroll through while you're doing it.
Okay,
Do you think you can touch on each one and we can look at it for a second?
I'm gonna try.
Thank you.
There's more pages.
Yeah.
So this is 30x2 located within a municipality with permanent zoning and subdivision bylaws, and then 10x2 in a municipality without zoning.
you gotta keep scrolling.
And then the next change is on page 6.
That was the 30x2, 10x2 network.
Yep, and then page 6 is the full exemption, so no permanent amendment is required for development or subdivisions within a designated center and within a radius of 1/4 mile of a designated village center and 1/2 mile of the other designated centers.
And somewhere else this sunsets in 2029.
This does not know.
Okay.
this needs to, because this is, this is interim, this is meant as an interim measure until the mapping is
Well,
done.
Could people live with it without
Yeah.
saying 2029?
Yes.
Yeah, because that's our intent.
That's our intent.
If anyone has a
We're gonna
question,
fix it
our
next
intent is
Okay.
this, yes.
Let's move.
Let's keep going.
Still on this, I picked 14 days for how long the sign has to be up for because the notice requirement for other Act 250 hearings is already set at 14 days before. There's also a 20-day notice provision, so we could wrestle with that. Oh, look, I did put it repealed 2029 on page 11.
Amazing.
See, there we go.
Then we
Okay.
won't have
okay,
to
that's
party.
fine.
And this is
That's
great,
fine.
thank you for this sign stuff.
Keep
Okay.
going.
On page 12, so now this is municipal zoning. This is the language yesterday with Charlie's, not Charlie, with Chip's input on, I
Wait,
do,
one past one, there was
sorry, so on page 12, municipal zoning. This is the language from Chip Sawyer. I do want to flag
So Anne was pointing out there was some yellow on 11
on
that she
11.
wanted to feed.
I think unless we just,
Oh, sorry, I said it really quickly.
oh,
Oh, that's the repeal.
that's
Right.
repeal, okay,
Sorry.
It's good for us to lay eyes on it. Yeah.
okay, very good.
So, on page 12, this is the language from Chip Sawyer. I do think you should revisit it next week.
Yeah.
Because I'm not certain it meets your intent, although maybe it does.
Okay.
Because it takes quadruplexes from a permitted use and makes it permitted, but only if that other condition is met.
Hmm.
So I don't know if that is your intent.
Okay,
Yeah, we may, It's
It
true,
may
'cause
not
some,
be
some places
united.
wanna do a quadruplex on a quarter acre instead of a third of an acre, so appreciate that flag, but some wanna do a third of an acre, so we have to.
So we can only
Yeah,
put
these
three
were the numbers
quadruplexes
checked
on my
off.
yard.
Mm-hmm. Right.
What?
I figured before we could put 5 quadruplexes on, I think my yard is an acre. And I was having trouble
Right.
visioning 5 quadruplexes and 20 parking.
So we're getting close. So this,
So
Yeah.
we filled up.
yeah, yeah, we're getting closer.
It could be a third, it could be a quarter.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
get that,
Yeah,
understood.
okay.
So then on page 15, there is language from, again, Chip Sawyer on the parking bylaws. So there's tandem parking language, so, they may require the tandem parking spaces are not shared between different dwelling units. And then, so, with the parking size standards, they shall not define them as larger than 9 by 18. However, they may allow a portion of parking spaces to be smaller for compact cars or similar use. And they may require larger ones for ADA compliant.
Later.
And then line 19, the shall went to a may for use of legal agreements for off-site parking. On page 18, the municipal panel shall adjourn the hearing and issue a decision within 180 days after the complete application was submitted, unless both the applicant and the panel agree to waive the deadline.
Beautiful.
Page 19. A minimum of 3% rounded up to the nearest whole person
Or any 25%.
or any 25 persons. And then I've added clarifying language to that on page 20. So, cause it section 4471 requires anyone who has participated, except that not every person of the 3% of the population needs to have participated. So that's new language on bottom of 20 into 21. You may want to discuss if there's a threshold on that,
Mhm.
if it is any,
Okay.
if it's, one person.
Mhm.
And then the only other thing is on page 25. Oh, well. So,
You have municipalities minutes.
right, so we actually I haven't walked you through any of this language that I prepared a few days ago regarding the mapping and the transportation corridor.
Yeah,
Okay.
So,
that's okay. We've been looking at it. We'll live with what's here.
For now.
Over the weekend.
Yes.
We'll read those here.
We have lots of obvious
And we'll-
choices and we have it,
And we can look at it over the weekend.
yeah.
Okay.
So I
Is
think
that it?
all right, that's good. Yeah,
Thank
that's it.
you, Ellen. Amazing job.
Can I move
Thank you.
to
No, not.
John has his sections, which he could,
Still here.
we could like
Alright.
just fast
You got
like.
2 minutes.
All right, John Gray, Office of Legislative Counsel, in the
There's your
hot
2
seat now. Only a few changes for me. Most of this is what was in the draft
okay.
previously.
Okay.
But let me jump 5 sections. Yeah, sorry, guys.
52.
Okay. So here's the start of the housing programs. It's been reorganized as you guys had requested.
Thank you.
I did add a piece here on the commercial conversion purposes. This is something that could be revisited, but just to include as something that's considered for the
Yeah.
70K fund. Moved the mirror appropriations to the mobile home section and deleted duplicative provisions there.
Yeah.
The other changes are fairly small. For the landlord certificate notice of emergency, I added in a piece to say that one of the triggers could be reliable notice that the state is under imminent threat of an emergency. This is in the event that those declarations of emergency are late.
Thank you.
All of this has remained the same. We did strip out the mobile home park definition amendment based on comments from DHCD, which I can talk about next week or sometime. The last piece is the couple of changes to age restricted housing. I've made this a more traditional right of first refusal as requested and bumped the period from 30 to 60 days. And then there's been added in age restricted housing rent increase notice. So this is no more than 60 days.
And we'll massage this, but it's
Yeah.
private senior housing.
I wonder how we got it.
So I should note this is limited to subsidized at this point, but.
So we'll work on that next
Yep.
week, but the intention was actually
Okay, more
private,
broader,
because
yep.
they have their set rules.
Yeah.
And then the landlord tenant law section has just been updated per the point that you guys made, expanded from evictions to landlord tenant more broadly.
Yes.
And then included the requested parties, BLA, JCD, judiciary. That's everything in here.
Yeah, so right now that eviction study, and it can change, is 10 people, 3 House members, 3 Senate members, VLA, Vermont Legal Aid, the judiciary, and someone from the administration.
Yep.
Does someone wanna make,
Yeah.
Ellen?
So before you make the motion, I just found a typo.
Okay,
So on page 25, I think if you're going to make a motion, you should move that you approve it.
Subject just
Subject to me not even editing, subject to me striking the sentence you wanted me to strike, but I missed.
oh, I wasn't gonna say anything, but I would like that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Where
that
is
was
that? Might be-
in writing, the definition may include the tier 3 to make everything general right now.
Okay,
And I can do that.
Or we
why
strike
don't we
it.
just improve it as it is right now and bring it in and fix it on Tuesday?
Well, because we're able to consider it a typo because I've made the request that we
Okay.
strike it for everyone.
Sorry,
here.
I struck after what line?
The
Okay,
definition may
so
include
what, all
Can
right,
she just say the lines in her motion?
lines 11 to
Yeah,
14 on
thank you.
page 25.
all right, okay.
Yeah.
I move to approve
Oh, yeah.
Bill, what is the number?
Draft
Draft
9.1
9.1
of our committee bill.
of our committee bill, striking lines 11 through 14 on
Oh, Wendy, sorry, Wendy. Right. Any discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will commence to call the roll.
Okay. Do I do it? Oh,
Alphabet.
Senator.
Yes.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Oh, actually, Senator Brock was first.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Okay, so Brock is a yes.
You.
Clarkson,
Yeah.
Harrison, yes, Ron Hinsdale.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, vote is 5-0.
Okay, 500. This is going to get a number and go to the floor. And we will pull it back in on Tuesday. I really appreciate everybody's hard work, especially the council.
Thank you, John and Ellen.
Golly.
Yes,
Do I
thank you.
take
Well,
Who wants to be the reporter?
I will be the.
No, sorry.
There is, yeah.
No, there's a special procedure, so she's gonna.
So we're off live
Yeah.
and people can head to the